So why don't we go ahead and get started? I hope some of our colleagues will be able to join us as they battle traffic and, I should talk into a mic, as they battle traffic and locate a parking spot. But it is great to see everybody in person again today. It's also particularly great to be back in the department offices here in the boardroom. So I'm glad everybody could be here. I know it's not easy to travel and to clear a day to be here. So we value you and respect your time, and we appreciate it very much. Why don't we do a round of introductions, and maybe we'll go to Alan, and we'll just go around this way and back up, and we'll end with Dr. Vanderburg.
Alan Burrow, Executive Director of District and School Performance at MDE.
Lindsay Brett, and I'm the principal at Plantersville Middle School in Lee County.
Hey, great morning. I'm Jermaine Brown, Hattiesburg Public School District Director of College and Career Readiness.
Morning, Bradley Robertson, Superintendent of the Oxford School District.
Great morning, Latoya Blackshear, Director of Planning and Evaluation, JPS.
Morning, Tara Nasha Brown Jones, Director of Alternative and Overage Program for Greenville Public.
Stephen Hampton, Lamar County School Superintendent.
Ryan Kirkendall, Director of Accountability and Research for DeSoto County Schools.
Greg Pazak, Director of Research and Development, Madison County Schools.
Lawrence Hudson, Superintendent of Western Line School District.
Christy Hovanet, Senior Policy Fellow, Excel and Ed.
And Paula Vanderford, Chief Accountability Officer, MDE.
Alicia Connolly.
We just said the worst place about this building is the parking and all downtown.
Well, I parked across the street from the Capitol, so I'm gonna have to take a trolley back. Yeah, so the address here does not, I need you, Mr. Allen, to send the instructions on what we needed to do like you did the last time. But good morning, everyone. Lawrence County School District.
We are glad you're here, and we hope your car is still there when we adjourn. So I'm sure it will be. How do I control the slides? Or is that, are you advancing it? That's fine. If you just, let's take a quick peek at the agenda. Here in just a short moment, we're going to switch to hearing any updates from the department, and they'll take us into some remarks about schools impacted by tornadoes. Then we're going to pick up kind of where we left off at the last meeting, talking a little bit more about what we called it beyond academics. So we want to hear more of your advice about your, where we might go in terms of expanding the indicators in the accountability system, or if not in accountability, how we could expand reporting and support initiatives. Talk a little bit about possibilities for innovations in district accountability, just a starter of a conversation there. We'll see where it takes us. After lunch, we're going to roll up our sleeves and have a more technical conversation about growth, and then we will end with chronic absenteeism. Don't be shocked when you see that on the agenda. We heard your voice clearly last time about your appetite for it being an accountability, or rather your lack of interest in it being an accountability. But we also heard you say that it's important, and we want to make sure that we are in touch with the research and the information about chronic absenteeism. So even if it's not a part of the formal accountability system, we know how we can get and use good data. So that's why that's on the agenda. So, and then, and we always end with hearing from you about your suggestions of things that we should emphasize and priorities for future meetings. I don't think I need to linger very long on purpose and overview. Again, we really value and prize this group to help advise the department to make good decisions about design and implementation of accountability. We really try to focus on policy priorities and making sure that we can tether our decisions to good rationale and priorities for what's going to be best for students in Mississippi. And we always like to say the feedback is received as a recommendation to the department. You know, you're one very important part of a much larger process of that informs the changes that are considered for accountability. Really appreciate this group has been, our interactions have been so positive and productive, so I don't think I have to spend time here. We just like to remind folks that we know that we get a range of positions and opinions when we talk about accountability, and we always like to just keep focused on the ideas and make sure we leave space for productive and respectful dialogue. It hasn't been a problem as long as I've been associated with this group, and this group in particular. It's been terrific. So I will turn it over, I believe, to Dr. Vanderford, if you have any updates from the department, and take us into the unfortunate situation with the tornadoes.
Good morning. As you all know, I'm sure you've seen the news that Dr. Taylor was not confirmed by the Senate as the state superintendent. So therefore, the board has appointed Mr. Mike Kent to serve as a short-term interim, as we have labeled him, for a period of 90 days, with the expectation, and again, I'm not speaking for the state board, only just sharing the information that's been shared with us, that we will have a long-term interim that will begin serving on July 1, and will serve likely for a year. Through June 30th of 2024. Mr. Kent wanted me to bring you his well wishes and regards, and thank you for your service on this task force, and he acknowledges the work that each of you do. He's been working part-time in a deputy's position at MDE for the last 10 years, so he's very familiar with all of the work that we do and the purpose that we serve with the work in this task force. He is in South Delta today attending a board meeting. They have not resumed classes there, so they're in hopefully their final stages of their plan to begin on-site instruction there. So he's not going to be able to attend today, but he said hopefully would be able to engage with you at your next meeting. Alan, do you have any more MDE updates before we go through maybe about the board item?
Well, so we do have the business rule edits that will be going to the board this month, and will go out for APA. So if any of you would like to submit public comment, please do. We appreciate the feedback that we get through the APA process, the public comment process on any changes. So look forward to that. There's been some chatter about changes to accountability this year. The communication from the department is that there's not changes to accountability this year, with the exception of two things, that we're not going to continue counting SCD students that return after their senior year, and participation measures for acceleration. So not a big change. And then the adjustment for 7th grade Algebra 1 testers. Other than that, there's no changes to accountability this go-around. So if you hear of any of that, rest assured, we don't intend to have
miscommunication in the field that we're trying to clarify. But all of the changes that Alan just mentioned are in the board document that will go to the board, and the board will meet on Wednesday, the 19th. This month rather than the Thursday, so it's they approved that date change, and so we'll release all the APA information. But again, as Alan said, you're familiar with all of that because all of those discussions we've held with the task force.
We'll be transitioning into supporting assessments. The assessment window is coming up, so I go out and do test audits, so you may see me in your district. We try to place staff as effectively and economically as possible. I live in the Brookhaven area, so if you're down that way, you may see me.
He shouldn't have given that away.
But no, we have a lot of staff that go out and do test audits, so we'll be trying our best to support not just audits, but the assessment process. So looking forward to that as always. So, and if as I tell districts when we go out, if there's any way that we can support you during the assessment window, please let the department know. We're here to do that. So glad to help.
Is that all for the update? Okay. All right, I guess. So we'll move in. We have a couple of slides. You've probably already seen this information that went out from communications, but we just wanted to touch on it and give you a little bit of information on where we are. we have 7 districts that have been impacted by the most recent tornadoes. We don't have, that's on slide 9, I think. Oh, okay. We did have, so Aberdeen is not listed. They did have a small community that had a little bit of damage, and they've had a few displaced students, but they did not have any damage to their schools and did not have any loss of life of any school staff. So the districts that you see listed on the screen, some, of course, sustain more damage than others. We have South Delta, as I mentioned, that still has not been able to resume classes, but hopefully will be able to do so after this week, we're hoping. So that's yet to be determined. Amory, unless anything changed, I have not talked to Mr. Jones this week, but they were to resume school today. But they still have some issues with their roads and, not able to get their buses throughout their district. So a little bit concerned about the number of students that may return to school today, and we'll continue to follow that. On the list, we had Humphreys County and New Albany. They did not miss any days. When the storm hit on Friday night, they were able to resume school on Monday. And then with Carroll and Monroe and Winona, I think they missed Monday and Tuesday, and all were able to resume school on Wednesday following the storm. So with the exception of the 2 outliers in the districts, in those 2 districts we got back. So lots of damage in all of these areas. I think about 3 of the districts had loss of life for district personnel, and maybe a district or 2 with lost a student or 2 in that. So really varies right there, but that's the 7 districts that we're really focusing on and trying to provide assistance throughout the assessment window. So on the next slide, what we had provided to you was, so when we started having conversations with our vendors, excuse me, we did not have the authority because the board expects, under normal circumstances, that the accountability results is approved in September for other purposes like school improvement and things like that. So we were trying to initially, and that's where we are right now, trying not to impact our accountability timeline. So we extended the ELPT window for all districts by 2 weeks. So if we could give everyone the benefit and it not impact the receipt of our data files and our accountability timeline, we tried to do that. So we also extended the K-readiness post-test. Didn't get 2 full weeks here, I think, but maybe about 10 days. We extended the MAP-A window by 1 week. And then for MAP, for all 4 content areas, we added another week to the end of the school year. It was originally to end on the 12th. And so this is what we were able to do for all districts. Now, when we looked at the 3rd grade ELA for promotion, and then what we needed for early graduates, that window is scheduled to end on the 21st of April. Had we provided an extension to those 2 areas statewide, it would have impacted the receipt of our data files, and for 3rd grade, it would have impacted our retest 1 and our retest 2 dates. But the assessment vendor said if we stick with only the 7 districts that were impacted by the storm and work for their 3rd grade, because I don't think we're going to get all of those tested, particularly in South Delta and maybe Amory, by the 21st, that they could manage a couple, 2 or 3 districts in adjusting that April 21st window. But we just didn't feel like statewide it was necessary to impact all of the plans that other districts had moving forward for your retest opportunities and your remediation opportunities. So we felt it was best to leave that as is. So we're going to handle third grade and early graduates and senior retest on a case-by-case basis. So at this point, a lot of questions are being asked, what we're doing otherwise. We do not have all of our data collected. We do not know the amount of instruction that all of these districts, particularly Amory and South Delta, are going to have missed. So we're just looking at it on a case-by-case basis as we move through. So if there's any other conversations that we need to have with this group, we will come forward at a later date. We did get a call from the Department of Ed regarding the assessments, and it is clearly their expectation, even with the storm, that we test all eligible students and that we work with our vendors to make necessary adjustments, either to extend the current windows we have or to schedule a special window for those districts to test. So I was pretty clear that there were not going to be any assessment waivers. So as we move forward, we'll just look at the participation rates and so forth and so on for these districts and make those decisions at a later date regarding accountability. Makes sense? Does anyone have any questions about so far? And again, if it could benefit everyone statewide. Oh, and there is, I think, a note in there on that first bullet. I thought I had probably said everything there. So while all districts have the opportunity to adjust to those windows, we do need you to notify student assessment if you're going to alter your calendar by the 12th. And for the reason that Alan just stated, we are required to audit. For our peer review process, for our test security audits, and we already had those calendars set for when we would have staff in districts. So if you make any changes to that, we don't want to drive to North Mississippi all the way to Corinth and expect them to be testing and then find that they've changed their windows. So we have to try to be good stewards of our time and resources. So we need that notification. Any questions?
I know you all have been down in South Delta, and I don't really know about a lot of the damage in the other places. I just know South Delta because we're neighboring districts, and I've been in communication with their superintendent trying to offer whatever assistance we can, and I know you all have been there since day one. Do you all know the exact number of children that has been displaced? Because we have a number trying to enroll in our district. We have a lot in Hollandale. There's a lot of students from that district that are in hotels in Greenville. So my question is, even when they open up, just how many kids will be able to get there? And we're doing all that we can to try to help them bus kids and use whatever resources we have. But the reality of it is there's a lot, and I don't know exactly how many, and I know you all have been there. Maybe you all know the number of students that's been impacted, but
it's huge in South Delta. Out of their 600 plus enrollment, we do not have a good handle on that number. We have been tracking in MSIS, and at a meeting that we had last week, we did not have any students that were displaced by the storm that had enrolled in any other district under McKenty-Vento as of last Wednesday. Now,
I don't know what the as of date would be on that data, but several weeks later.
Yeah. So we're trying to get a handle on, but to the point that to your point and what they're talking about, one of the things today, until Amory resumes and until South Delta resumes, we just don't know what that impact's going to be as far as the students that come back to school. Now, we have had conversations with many of the districts impacted, and one of, not their first concern, not, of course, I don't want to say that, but it is a concern about getting their students back in, getting them tested according to these assessment windows and their participation rates and the third grade gate, and are they going to get the same waivers that we got with the pandemic? But one of the things that we've looked very closely, and the governor's state of an emergency is out there, it does not give the agency the same flexibility in this state of emergency that we had with the state of emergency with COVID. So right now, the MDE, our state board, does not have any authority under this current state of emergency to waive any state law, such as passing the 3rd grade reading test to be promoted to 4th grade, or the accountability statute. So right now, we're just working within the policies that we have and trying to take it a day at a time, to be honest with you. But we are working to try to determine how many students will go back to
Is there any flexibility when it comes to participation? I know you say y'all don't have any with the laws, but is that an exception when it comes to participation? Because I just don't see them coming close with me seeing the damage and the number of homes that's been destroyed.
Right.
And the number of people that's been displaced. I just don't see them coming close to the participation. So what is the, in a situation like that?
Well, and we haven't identified specifics, because like I said, we really are trying to honestly take it a day at a time and assist them in getting back into the building so that we have a handle on the number of students that have been displaced. But the federal law just tests all eligible students, and so that may be 50%, that may be 70%, just like what we asked that districts did in the pandemic in 21 when we tested, just test all eligible students. And so that's where we are right now. We do have a couple, just off the top of my head, we do have a state board policy in the business rules that if a district doesn't meet a certain amount of participation across the board, that they're downgraded a letter grade. So that's something that would be in the state board's authority. That's not in state statute.
Okay, got it.
So that's what we're trying to do as we work through this, is dissect what we have to do for the federal piece and what flexibilities do we have. And right now, we have none in our state law for the passage of the 3rd grade reading test, and having accountability assignments. So beyond that, we're really trying to because with the federal guidance, with the feds, I think we'll be okay, because we'll assess all eligible students in the windows and with the extensions, and then we'll report that data. And so, because they're not concerned with our A through F letter grade assignment, that's in our state statute. So we're bucketing federal, state, and what state board has authority to do. And it's just a little bit too early. I certainly don't mean to sound insensitive, because we're certainly aware. We've talked with those superintendents. We've had just blanket waiver request for no assessment, no accountability in some situations. So we're just having to take it a day at a time and gather the data. And that's exactly what I explained to the Department of Ed, that it was too soon for us to know the impact.
We had some questions about Fay, like if you enroll students at this point in the school year,
So they wouldn't impact the districts into which they're enrolling. But we, like I said, are taking a look at all the impacts.
I don't think we're gonna really get that number until they open up. Because
right. We're
their
trying
last
to.
concern right now, and a lot of them is, okay, school, we don't even have anywhere to stay. So I don't think we're gonna
Right,
get that
exactly.
accurate number. And I think, like you said, MSIS probably hadn't shown. We've been contacted by a host of, like the mayor from Myersville. So those students come, some to Western Line and some to South Delta. And she has a list of students from Myersville in the elementary school that they're trying to get enrolled. But until school opens, I think everybody's just kind of riding the wave until, but I know you'll probably start to see that number increase once they open the doors, because they're everywhere. So
That's our understanding.
yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Vandiver. Thanks for the update and information. We're going to continue on with the agenda, and if you can go to the next slide here. One of the things we thought worked well last meeting, we got some positive feedback from folks, is giving more space for folks to have conversations and make broader recommendations, and we want to do that again today. Let me actually, while I set this up, let me send these around. Can you take, as it comes around, take 2 sheets. Should be front and back one sheet and front the next sheet. So, sorry, my stapler was out of staples when I was doing this, and I was,
Copy those.
but that's fine, probably best to have them loose anyway. Well, as we were thinking about the best way to get your advice, we thought we had great conversations back in March, where our general topic was having you give us advice on a broad range of indicators that could be considered to broaden the scope of accountability. And actually, I appreciate it. I think everybody approached that with a really practical viewpoint and real humility about not trying to do too much too quick and being very thoughtful about that. And what we tried to do is we looked at your feedback. You'll see some of that in the meeting notes that we prepared from the last meeting. And we tried to streamline the categories that we thought came up most prominently from your conversation, and created a version of an exercise you did last March. What we want to do today is try to just get a little more focus. Think of this as kind of a pyramid. We started broad, and we want to see if we can narrow it just a little bit more, and see if we can get more specific advice about priorities or recommendations for next steps. If you can go to the next slide. So we're going to structure this similar to what we did last time. Everybody should have a sheet, and again, it's front and back one and front for the other. There's 5 categories: next level readiness, digital literacy, service and leadership, social emotional, and school climate safety. And if you look on these sheets and what's important to you isn't listed, then just bring it into the conversation, because we don't mean to restrict that. And we're going to start by having folks just spend a little time individually making notes on your sheet. What sources of data should be prioritized from this streamlined list? And then you see in the next column, if you'll go to the, so on the next column, this is where we're getting a little more specific. Recommendations for next steps. So, and I just put the text in red here to give you an example of how I think you might approach this. So if you look at this first category and you say, well, on this list, there's either things I think we're already doing well, or I don't think we need to focus on, but in my judgment, again, I just made this up just for an illustration. In my judgment, I think we ought to focus more on capstone projects or diploma options. And then over on the right, you'd say, tell us your specific advice about that. Do you want to, 1 would be the highest, consider it for inclusion in the accountability system. 2, no, I just want to collect and report that. 3 is, I would just want to see the department provide more resources and support. And 4 is, I don't know enough, I need more research to learn more. And you can do multiples of those, right? So you can say, for example, capstone project, that's interesting to me. I don't know if it's ready for prime time yet, but I'd like to do more research. Fine, you put a number 4 there. Diploma options, you may say, oh, this one I feel is more near-term priority for me. I want to both consider it for an inclusion, collect and report, and do research. But the idea here is that we're getting more focused on what sources of data you care about and how you want to use those. And again, only pick the ones you think from this sample list you think are most important. So I expect that, there'll only be a few in each category, if any. So don't feel like you have to say something about all of them. What we'll do is give you about 10 minutes or so to work individually, and then I'd love for you to get into groups. And this is another difference from last time, please, colleagues. When you get into groups, I would like to receive a worksheet from each group that we'll collect. So we're not taking your individual worksheets. That's just for you to gather your thoughts. But if each group could share with us for our meeting notes and our record keeping your group recommendations that hopefully represent some kind of consensus view, then that will help us in being more deliberate and clear about the things that you care about. Does that make sense? And I think we'll do the groups like this. It looks like our numbers are such that we'll do 5, 5, 4. So we'll go Christy to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think, is that Stephen there, the 5th? And then we'll pick up with Crystal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is it Latanya? Latoya, thank you, Latoya. And then the 4 remaining over here will be a group. So after you have a moment to collect your thoughts, gathering groups, we'll spend another 15 minutes or so, share across, what your thoughts are. And then if somebody would be a recorder for that group and, just put, like this group, put group 1 on a new worksheet, I'll bring you a new one. Somebody over here put group 2, somebody over here put group 3, and we'd love to receive that from you after you share your remarks verbally. Why don't we wrap up wherever you are? I appreciate everybody spending your time on this. I'd love it if each group would share out some of your high-level insights about what your recommendations are. Maybe we'll just start over here at Group 1 and work our way around to Group 3. And love to hear from you. So who's the lucky report out person from Group 1?
They chose me, but Greg is gonna help clean up everything.
Be your safety nets?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to next level readiness, we were kind of all over. Everybody had some good thoughts on it, but how do you really measure it when you got so many different pathways and you got so many different career options? And when you post-secondary, how many years do we track? Like, we started the middle college program. I know Greenville had the early college program. I know Vicksburg had a middle college program, and Lamar County, I think they had a middle college, and some of you all may have the same thing, middle, early. Okay, so these kids are graduating high school diploma and associate's degrees when they graduate high school. So where does that fit when we start tracking? And then you have other students who graduate high school 3.0 and better, and they never go to college. So were they not next level readiness? Kids that go to the military, well, the ASVAB may be more relevant to those, or if I'm on a CTE path, I may not go 4 to 5 years at a university. I may do a fast track program in nursing. Well, how do we really track next level readiness without some sort of a assessment where when students graduate, these are the basic skills that they need to be prepared at any field, any level? I just think we got to figure out a way to level the playing field to measure it before they graduate, because after they graduate, they all over the place. And it's different. Stephen, if you want to just kind of talk about what you were sharing about how the resources and different pathways and things that's offered in some districts is just different.
Yeah, I think, so for us, we're not a rich district, but we're a larger district that have more means, and so it's just getting in this equity conversation of how, with us, everything on these 2-3 pages we could implement. If it's going to impact our accountability model, we could implement. I can hire people to put in place this, that, and the other, but I've worked in school districts that don't have the means or the tax base to be able to do that, and when they're looking at just trying to keep teachers because of shortfalls and budgets and this and the other, it's just I don't say it's unfair. I mean, that some districts don't have those means to be able to address some of those things. In my opinion,
So it sounds like a couple of themes here on the readiness was it needs to be broad because readiness means so many things to different learners. But that is sort of that conflict with something being uniform and comparable and being attainable, as Superintendent was saying, for districts that have, they're differently resourced. So did that? So did you end up with any particular recommendations that rolled out in that category, or that you felt like, or is this just really just identified these important questions to guide our future inquiry?
And I think one other thing we touched on is just the subjectivity of how you measure some of these items of how do you take some of that subjectivity out and measure?
Gotcha.
You know, that's
Yeah.
a big concern because.
Great
if
questions.
you're
Yeah.
if you're relying on self-reporting, you know, it could be gamed easily. And how do you ensure the credibility or the accuracy of data? That's what I mean.
Okay.
And each of these target a different learner, each of them. So if we just choose one, you're gonna hit this population, but you won't accurately assess the other population. So it's just hard to choose one.
Okay.
Yeah, for instance, on MDE's on websites, there are now statistics about what percentage of your students are going to four-year colleges or whatever. But keep in mind that that data is related to only students going in state. And so that's not even a full picture necessarily of what's occurring in your district. So it may be just challenging even collecting the data that's representative of your whole population. So,
Gotcha. Okay, good. Anything else from this group? So we're looking across the other indicators. Did you have time to get to some of the other categories?
We skipped to social emotional learning,
Okay.
and we're gonna let him share his Kirkendall share
Ryan's
his.
got it solved for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
he got this cause and effect theory that we want to share.
Well, I mean, I don't know it's gonna, I'm saying anything groundbreaking, I mean, but to me, and I shared this at the last meeting, but social emotional learning is the most important. And it's, if you think about it, it's sort of the precursor to the third one, to school safety. So if you handle social emotional well, whatever that means, which is the problem, but you make that obviously the school's focus, well, you're actually cause and effect with school safety. And so, I mean, we just think about school safety in the effect world. It's locking everything down, and police, and all these things, and, you know, people want to harm teachers, whatever. But if you really get down to where it stems from, it's mental health. And so, and that's what social SEL is about. So now, we're an accountability group. So what does that mean? I mean, I say the same thing I said last time. I struggle with the indicators that were mentioned that talked about participation in this and that, portfolio for this and that, because you're going to leave out the students we're trying to find. I mean, and now you've made it a game. Okay, we need you to get 10 awards because that's going to help our accountability, and we need you to do this and that because that was just, unfortunately, you turn it to a game, and it's a score game, and so it goes back to surveys. You would know better than any of us, Dr. Domaleski, but I've heard the states that do it, they include some form of surveys in this, and surveys are the most subjective thing on the planet, right? So how do you make that objective and put that in an accountability model? You probably can't. But again, it's the most important thing in my opinion. So that one I struggle with, like, because it's like it's up here and then it's down here as far as what we do as a group here. So that's just one thing I think about. But now, as far as the third one, we all agreed that shouldn't be in the accountability model, the school safety, because the truth is, I mean, I don't know a superintendent where school safety is not on their mind morning, noon, night, and day, and they're doing everything in their power as far as that goes. So, like, you know, Mississippi, you know, you've told me this before, we take accountability real serious compared to a lot of other states, and, like, you know, we get too worked up about it, to be honest. And so we always think if it's not in the accountability model, nobody cares. And that's true for a lot of things. I think all of us would admit that. I don't think school safety is one of those, though. School safety is number one to everybody, whether it's in the accountability model or not. So that was our thoughts.
Okay. These are great insights. Seems like some rich discussion there.
Did we leave anything? This was our reporter. Did we leave anything out? She was the reporter, but did we leave anything out? Did we cover everything?
No, just, we did mention post-high school indicators and just kind of decided that we probably shouldn't be accountable for things that happen 5, 6 years after high school.
Notwithstanding potential gaps in the data, even just the distal connection is another challenge, yeah.
Just philosophical.
And we agreed that we're not proponents of changing the accountability model. We did agree to that.
Okay, all right. I'm putting this in the notes.
Do that in.
Okay, well, let's hear from, we have two more groups. Thank you very much, Group One. All right, Ms. Jones, would love to hear from you.
I'm gonna begin how Dr. Hudson ended. We are not components of adding anything
Okay.
to the accountability model. We wanted to make sure that that was number one. But we got into a great discussion about the next level readiness, and all of my counterparts were starting to say diploma options. I was the outlier. I don't like the diploma options. And I began to discuss why, and the only reason why is because who's using it? And what I mean, who's using it, why is it being utilized for our students and they're not being given additional scholarship funds? They're not being given different identifiers when they go to post-secondary. We put it into place, but do many outside that of the school system that they're working in actually understand the process of that? We do think it's a great opportunity, but we believe, number 4, some more additional research needs to be done. Utilizing that. We also talked about, of course, utilizing enrollment, looking at that data, and also brought up about FAFSA completion. I discussed with them that being a Gear Up district, we were able to get some information about, we were struggling in thinking about why was our FAFSA rating so low. I'm like, we're pushing it and we're pushing it. We ended up finding out it had nothing to do with education. It had all to do with environment. Our students are not carried on their own personal parents' tax forms. So when the time comes for them to apply for FAFSA, you have to now go and find out who carried them on that particular form. Will they give me the information in a timely manner? And if they don't, my baby cannot get enrolled in school. So they have to sit out a year, become an independent, and then try to enroll then. So looking at some of those different outliers when it comes down to your demographic areas are things that I believe we should look at when we're looking at that next level rating. So it may hit the point that we were talking about, but I think we talked about, some good stuff then. The women warriors, we got to everything. I don't know about what that superintendent group over there was doing, but digital literacy, definitely looking at cyberbullying training and cyber foundation training along with our AP Comp Principal. Looking at also the requirements. AP normal teacher with regular content, we know now you no longer have to have that summer training, you just have to have that endorsement, whereas with AP Computer Science and those other digital literacy pieces, you have to go through training. They actually have 3 years to get that training. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, and you have to have somebody who's also passionate about that particular content, because I can go and get a football coach and I just need him to be the head football coach, send him to MDE, Mississippi State for 6 weeks to do that training, and then he'll come in, put them on a couple of little lessons, and hey, I got my head football coach. So he's not going to get the same outcome as somebody who went to Mississippi State, did an engineering degree, decide, hey, I want to teach, and now let me put forth my knowledge into that. So you have to look at that as well. We looked at collecting and reporting more on that, as well as conducting. Service and leadership. We have several courses that has service and leadership ingrained into the curriculum. Looking and collecting that data with that. Longevity of those programs. We have some districts who do great jobs with Beta, with Mississippi Jobs for Graduates, Mississippi Scholars. We have all of those great programs. But if you are similar to myself, when I first came into the industry, I knew nothing about Mississippi Scholars. I didn't know anything about Mississippi grads. So it depends on what was left for me. You have other districts that they leave outlines of, this is a requirement for our school district. So you have those inequalities when it comes down when you're looking at leadership pieces. And then too, you have some people who are really good business managers. I mean, they can take photos for days. They're a great marketing campaign. So you can see all of their activity where you have somebody who, the sponsor is 65 years old and care less about Instagram. So you don't know that they're doing these great, wonderful things. So you have to keep that in mind, and we also put a number 3 for that as well. Okay, social emotional, kind of hit the same thing that the superintendent, I'm gonna call y'all a superintendent group. Surveys was the key. You can observe all day, teachers told them, hey, y'all all get Chick-fil-A at the end of the day if you just do this observation. But if you're looking at artifacts and you're looking at surveys, 140 kids are not gonna tank you all together, all on purpose. That means it's something that potentially is missing. And if we're able to look at that data, I know My coworker here was stating that they use one particular software in their district. I like the software that we use because it gives you some actual 5-minute activities to work with some of those issues that you may have in your building or in your classroom. And then, of course, what our superintendent group said, along with our superintendent, every teacher, every principal, every director, safety is number one before you even walk through the door. So we're also looking at that ADA piece. For a lot of us, we know that that's a major issue. Of course, never to be included in the, please put that little sticker, never to be included in our accountability model, but it's something that we need to make sure we're addressing for the success of our districts and our schools as well. Of course, our comprehensive needs assessment, and we were talking about the fact of checking the pulse one time a year. You don't check a body one time a year to make sure that it's healing and that it's moving forward. So why would you do the same thing if you have a dying body in your district? Why would you only check it one time? You know, even at the minimum twice, to see if you have a chance to do a quick change, especially at the end of the winter season. You're getting ready for testing. What are some things we're doing right and wrong that we potentially can go ahead and do a quick little change up that make sure that we're successful as we go into the assessment season? So that's us. We're good to go.
What a magnificent job reporting out. Thank you. Thank you, Terry.
I am known as the mouth of the South.
No, that was a really, really clear and persuasive summary. But let me just sort of say back a few things I heard to make sure I'm capturing this, and I am looking forward to collecting the sheets you produced. So you had, you led with, you're not advocating additions to consequential accountability, but you highlighted a number of things that you felt like would be prudent to further research or to consider an investment of resources. And I appreciate your remarks about, like, if you're gonna do something, you gotta do it well. You can't just say we're doing it to check a box. It really has to accompany a proper training and implementation and rollout. And I heard you talk about the importance of having objective, comparable measures if you're going to do it. So things like social, emotional. So very helpful. Very.
Did I leave anything out?
You did great.
I have some follow-up questions. Meyer, how fast you can talk. I wish I could talk that fast sometimes, but I can't. So you mentioned some challenges with completion of the FAFSA. Can you talk about that again? Because that was new to me. What?
Yeah. When we were Gear Up District in Greenville, that meant we started to receive a little bit more hands-on attention with Get to College, the organization, and with some other entities as well. One of our goals was to get our FAFSA up to, I think, 75% completion for our students. So of course, it's a 5-year grant. The first year, we also have a Gear Up coordinator in my building. At the time, I was at Greenville High School. I was the head principal there. So when we started getting the information in, I'm like, what's the problem? You know, we're having the meetings. We have an in-house FAFSA person. Our city even became a, forgot the name of it. It's like a Gear Up City or whatever, that now we're trying to get our adults in as well. So when we started looking at the data, and I talked with my kids at that time, and they're gonna say, well, Ms. Jones, my mama don't want to give me the paper. I said, what do you mean? They don't want to give me their tax papers. Our community believes that if I have your tax information, I'm going to use it for something illegal. Most of my kids, because they're not with their parents have allowed friends, family members to carry them on their taxes to get additional tax refunds. And if you wait till their senior year to tell them, hey, you need your paperwork, they're not going to get it. Because the person, either one, doesn't even live in our community anymore. They can't get in touch with them, or because and I'm just gonna be honest, I'm not exaggerating when I say most of my seniors last year didn't even live with their guardian. I had children living on their own. They were going to work, paying their senior fees, doing all these things on their own, and then I said, hey, tell mama come up here so we fill out your FAFSA. What you talking about, woman? I don't even stay with that lady. So you have those issues that we never address. So before I can even get you on the grade level, I can't even get you on the financial level into the school or what have you. So what we started doing was, I started having summer orientations, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors. The first thing that we talked about, because we were a Gear Up district, is potential post-secondary education. And what was the first step? The first step was starting now, mama and daddy. The orientation was with mama and daddy. It was not with the kids. I need you to carry your kids on your taxes. It sounds like it's the most mystery thing in the world to even say at a meeting, but it had to happen. So when I started saying that on a regular basis at all of my meetings, that's when parents said, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, what do I need to say? Last year, we had a FAFSA graduation, FAFSA rating of 72%. I blame it all on Kelly Benford. She is my Gear Up person. They have now posted her, and she works for Mississippi Valley State University. Because she literally went down the line along with my counselors. Okay, how many we did today? Okay, we did 10 today. We did 15 today. We talked to Brandy that said get to college. Okay, Brandy, what did it look like in the system? Pulled everybody in. We started looking at, okay, we got 25 more left, Ms. Jones. Okay, well, I need to get them on board. I think I maybe had 10 left. The ones who were left on the list, Ms. Jones, I'm not going to school. But what are we doing? Are you going to military? Are you going to trade? What is going on? And if they were going to trade, I said, okay, are we going to a school to receive FAFSA? Because the grant would actually pay for their trade school. So it had to be the questioning. I can't do a big meeting. I have to go to them one-on-one. I have to pull my data. And if I don't do that, they're not going to be successful. It's just what I had to do. But after you start that particular preset, now the next group knows what's coming up. The next group knows what's coming up. Okay, Ms. Jones, when we going to have orientation? Okay, Ms. Jones, when we going to talk about this? Okay, Ms. Jones, when we going to have college signing day? It has to be a culture, exactly what the superintendent stated. It has to be a culture, but you have to establish it first, and then you move forward from there.
Interesting. That's helpful.
And that's why the research, the piece on that, why we said that research is important, because you have to understand the geographical locations of which this is happening. To understand the disconnect.
And I'll add to.
No, I'm sorry, did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I really think it's a social, economic, cultural thing, not necessarily just geographical, but economics, socioeconomics is, she's right, she's spot on.
Well, these are the exact kinds of conversation and context we need to make good decisions. So I really appreciate that, Ms. Jones.
And can I say something that someone said over here about if we had to put where our students did post-high school, that it would become a game, and he's correct, because CTE does it now. Okay. When you have to complete that beginning of the year, where did the kids go? You literally just go in and you put it down at MSIS. And all it is other, military, or post-secondary. Nobody really, well, if you get honors, of course they check, not trying to throw anybody under the water. But if you're willing to be unethical, you literally can go through the list and say, other, because I found out they worked at Wendy's. It never asks you a true question of, well, what's the name of the school? What year are they in? And if they didn't do that, then you could go through and then now, hey, I got a high percentage of completion rate. So just wanted to add that little piece.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let's go to group three. We'd love to hear insights from group three.
Yeah, we kind of looked at it through the lens of accountability versus improvement.
Okay.
And then we weren't as closed-minded as the rest of the group. Anything added to the accountability.
Please put his name beside him.
No,
We need to talk.
No, I'm kidding. We did have some conversations around a couple of things under the next level readiness but again, it's all about access and attainability, for all districts across the state. We put a 1 by advanced coursework because we really think we're already doing that.
Okay.
With AP and dual enrollment and all of those things. We're already measuring those in our current accountability model. We really didn't know what extension of that bullet point was talking about when it said additional advanced coursework. We put a 1 by the possibility of industry credential. And then the last one we put a 1 by, which has been mentioned a couple of times, is the diploma options. That was, 2 of us had a 1 by that in our individual, and the other 2 members of the team had a 0.5 by it. So we added the 2 0.5s together. And basically, the majority of the group thought that could be an option. Because when we talked about the diploma options in depth a little bit, we do understand that those diploma options are encouraging acceleration in a lot of different ways, right? For example, GPA. Well, there is research that says a 2.8 GPA gives you the better opportunity to, proceed in higher education. There's research that supports that, right? So Those are really the only three, and we didn't put a single one anywhere else
Okay.
on the entire page on any of the other categories.
Okay.
So that's the accountability lens. But improvement, we put a lot of twos. As in, we thought there would be value in reporting and sharing this information amongst all of ourselves, because that's how we improve, right? If Steve is doing something, whether it's chronic absenteeism or whether it's climate and culture surveys or whatever it may be, if he's doing a better job than we are in Oxford, then I want the ability to know that and to reach out to Steve and say, why is your student or your parent satisfaction higher than mine? What are you doing, right? I think we get so caught up in accountability that we forget about improvement. And I think the reporting of a lot of this information and sharing it with each other encourages improvement across the state, whereas right now our accountability model does not, right? Because our accountability model puts us in this sense of competition instead of improving. Now, we can say that that doesn't happen, but it does. We all know that it does, right? So things that we put twos by that we thought would be reportable. One was FAFSA, right? Understanding how some school districts are increasing FAFSA participation. College admissions and enrollment. You know, how are we getting more students enrolled in colleges across the state? We put a two by extracurricular activities, right? How are districts getting more kids involved in things outside of the academic world, inside of their system? Because we all know the value that those type of activities bring to not just high school or college, but life outside in society. We put a two by the surveys, both in the social emotional survey, the surveys under social emotional, as well as the surveys under school climate. I would dare say that a lot of our districts already do surveys around parent satisfaction, employee engagement, and student engagement, but we never really share that information with each other to try to learn and to grow from one another. And then we put twos by chronic absenteeism, which we already get a report from the state about that. And then I said the surveys as well. There was one that was intriguing to us that we wanted some more information or support. And that's the idea of creating portfolios for students, starting at an early age, going through the end of their high school career. Because we do think a student portfolio brings another sense of knowledge and expertise when kids are applying to college or applying for jobs or whatever it may be. So we would like to see some additional support in creating student portfolios for our students across the state.
Excellent, excellent. Anything else from group three? So it sounds like for accountability, I appreciate how you sort of divided it up. Things that are potential candidates for accountability versus things that we just want to learn more about and share and help improve. The two areas related to readiness are kind of inspecting our current list of college career credentials, whether it's advanced courses, certifications, and the like, to make sure they're appropriately comprehensive. And the other is continuing to look at diploma options. And that came up, I think, in other conversations as well. So that's something that we probably ought to keep track of here, this task force. You know, what would it look like? What can we learn about that? Again, I'm not saying I'm hearing everybody voting that in. I'm just saying I'm hearing enough interest that we ought to probably continue to look at this and ask ourselves if that's something that we want to spend some of our time thinking about together. But apart from that, I'm hearing a lot of, and I heard this across all groups, a lot of an appetite for saying, where can we just learn about strong practices and have that shared across districts and schools so that we can improve how we're serving students. And I won't list back, but there's a lot of areas that I thought were cross-cutting in many of the groups. So very helpful, colleagues, very helpful. I think it's accomplished what we wanted to do, which is to sort of clarify a little bit of what our ambitions are as a task force for future innovation. Some of this will come back up after our break when we'll talk a little bit about district accountability and see, we're sort of going to pressure test your appetite for innovation there. And then we'll get into some more technical stuff after lunch. But we are due a break. It's anything else before we go to break? Thank you, guys. It is 10:40. Can we come back at 5 minutes to 11? I say that knowing if we can come back at 11, I'll be happy. So, at 10:55, if we can. Let's come back into session. And we've got three things this afternoon. We're going to talk about academic growth, and then we have a session where we do, I think, a fairly succinct update on chronic absenteeism. And like I said, before we adjourn, we'll have an opportunity for everybody to give voice to your priorities before we wrap up. But so, as you know, we've talked about growth in previous meetings, and there are really two primary questions that we leaned into for this update to inform our conversation this afternoon. We were looking at mostly the, I'll call it, stability in level 3 was one of the areas that task force members said we should investigate. And the two research questions that we wanted to bring information to you about to inform our conversation is, one, to what extent do we observe academic growth on MAP? As you can see from the text here, in other words, do we have evidence of growth external to the transition table model used for accountability? So stated another way, we want to say, are we not seeing growth in level 3 because there's not that much growth happening in level 3, or because we think the model's not well specified? So we're trying to get smarter about that. That's one of the areas that we wanted to explore and bring to you. And then the second part of what we're going to talk about today is, well, what would be the impact if we added a category 3C? So what if we divide up that level a little more? And if you go to the next slide, please. The data that we're using here is 18 to 19. So we're trying not to use pandemic impacted data. So we looked at growth for students from 2018 to 2019. We calculated scale score differences for examinees in each year. So, and I look at 2 grades in each of mathematics and language arts, which I'll show you in just a second. So as an example here is we look at, say, the grade 8 2019 score minus the grade 7 2018 score. So that difference is what we'll call growth. And we're going to do that at various grain sizes. We're going to do that at the performance level, at the growth category level, and at the scale score level. So I think you'll say by the time this presentation's over, enough. We're overwhelmed with data. And then I'll look at the distribution of those change scores, and then we'll get into the impact of adding a 3C. Next slide. So, okay, there's a ton going on in this graph. I promise I'll explain it all. So let me start with what's on each axis here. The scale score in 2018 is on the X, or the horizontal axis, and the scale score difference, so 2019 minus 2018, is on the Y-axis. That, because the way the vertical scale works in Mississippi, a change of 100 is stability, right? So if you're at a 350 to a 450, then you were stable. If you went from a 350 to a 460, then you would have a difference of 10, right? And so that difference score, let me be super clear, that difference score is what's plotted on the Y-axis. And a little primer on box plots. So what I wanted to give you is a sense of the distribution of those scores, not just the overall score. So the box plots are, so the shaded or area or the box is where the interquartile range, or the middle 50% of values are. The whiskers, or the lines coming from the box, tell us where 95% of the values are. And the little dots above or below are outliers. So the main thing we're looking for is the pattern here. But we wanted to show you these box plots so you could get a sense for the spread as well. And the hashed vertical lines are the region of level 3, because that's the region of growth that we want to inspect. And you'll see this, and this same graph is going to show up multiple times because I'll do this for multiple grades. You'll see the same pattern every time we look at this, where the So student scoring at the lower regions in 2018 show higher growth. I mean, there's just more growth to be demonstrated. And student scoring in the upper regions show lower rates of growth. Part of that's just because there's a ceiling effect. You can't, if you're right up near the top of the scale, you can't grow that much. Part of that is just regression to the mean. It's just one of the things that happen is if you score very high or very low, students are likely to move towards a more central value in a subsequent year. But it's mostly pretty stable there in that level 3 region. You can, so if you just sort of look at, and I've got graphs that are clear that'll follow this, but in that level 3 region, some modest growth and in the lower regions of level 3 and some modest decline in the upper regions of level 3 on average. But you can see, obviously, there are students growing at very high rates and declining at very substantial rates all throughout this, which you would expect. We're talking about, I think, 30,000 something students per grade. You're going to see a lot of different values. Let me just pause there to say, do people understand what's being portrayed in this graph? I realize we packed a ton into the graph. So, and the one-line interpretation here is growth is mostly stable in level 3, with some exceptions. Let's go to the next slide, please. So these would be a little easier to interpret. Here, it's just rather than give you a box plot for every scale score point, now we're just going to give you a box plot for each performance level. And remember, the box is the middle 50% of students. The lines go out to 95%, and the little dots are outliers. So if you just focus on that one in the middle, remember 100 is stable. You can see it's pretty symmetrical about around 100, meaning that it's, it's the average student had very stable growth in grade 4 to 5 mathematics, but obviously there are students with substantial increases in declines. And I think the last one I have is another portrayal. This one just breaks it. Now you can just see it tabled, and there are growth values shown in the bar graph there. So looking at the table, for each growth level, 1A to 5, the mean growth, remember 100 means stable. So the mean growth, you see it from 125 on 1A to 89 in level 5. You see the number of students in each of those categories, the standard deviation, and then the bars reveal that same pattern you would have seen in the box plot. So you've got higher growth for students at lower levels, lower growth for students at higher levels. And we can hone in right here on 3A and 3B and say, see, 3A was a modest growth for the average student, 102, and 3B was a modest decline, 99. So again, I think the overall interpretation here is fairly stable for level 3. So this is going to repeat for 3 more grades. So I'll just go through them and let you see here, 7 to 8 mathematics. Also, same pattern, high growth for lower achieving students, increasing declines as you get higher up the scale, a lot of stability in the level 3 region. You can go to the next one, Alan. You guys just tell me at any point to slow down, say more, say less. I'm happy to do that. Here we have it by performance level. I kind of think this last one here is maybe the most interesting one in terms of getting the interpretation. Go to the table. This, I think, is about as clear as it gets in showing growth magnitude across levels. So in this case, you see mean growth of 99 and 98, so that's right at the 100 level, just a tick below it in level 3.
Is this all grade 8 math, or is this just grade 8 end of year for
This is 7 to 8.
Right, so in grade.
Oh, yeah, I would have only looked at grade 8. Yeah, I would not have looked at algebra or anything. Yeah,
So eighth graders taking algebra 1 wouldn't be included in
that's
this.
correct.
So this is an expected pattern then, because your eighth grade algebra students are not factored into this.
This is grade 8 math only, yeah, not algebra. Yeah.
Then that makes sense.
Okay, and then we have 2 more for ELA. Here's 4 to 5 ELA. I think what we found here, we'll see if we're right when we get to the table, is that there's a little bit more growth in ELA in level 3. So you can see those bars peak above the stability line and the region of level 3. But again, the same overall pattern. And here they are by performance level. And there it is, the table. So, yeah, so for 3A and 3B, just a tick above 100 for 3A, right at 100 for 3B. And again, an expected pattern of high growth for lower achieving students, more modest growth or even some declines for higher performing students. One more. 7 to 8 ELA. Fairly stable there in level 3. And you can see the stability by the values right at 100.
Yeah, I think algebra 1's probably influencing the math.
You think it might be dipping a little bit because of that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because even here, it's the same pattern that we're seeing in other grades. And everyone takes grade 8 ELA,
Yeah.
but not everyone takes grade 8 end of year math.
Gotcha. So the next couple of slides now is, and again, I know there's a lot going on here. I'm happy to continue to use these data as we have our conversations. But this shows the impact of adding a level 3C. Again, using 2018-19 data. This aggregates across all grades in this case. And what you'll see, do you have a question?
I do, before we go on. So showing us all that data, very interesting patterns, kind of what we would expect to see just from what we know. Do we have the ability to tease out what is noise versus what is actual learning and teaching? So I think about it in the context of we have an incentive for the low 25% to make growth. Is that a reason why we're seeing more growth at the bottom? And then we don't have any disincentive if the student just remains in level 4, just remains in level 5, so maybe we're not focusing as much on those, and so we're not seeing as much growth and improvement. So is there a way to, and I don't think the answer is yes, distill out exactly what's attributable to noise in data versus what's attributable to actual learning and maybe what we're already incentivizing in the model?
Yeah, these are good questions, and yeah, nothing here would imply any kind of causal relationship between accountability incentives and outcomes. I mean, the only thing I could think of would be to look for patterns across years, which would help us to see a little bit of how much bounce is affecting this, which is, I think, a good suggestion for future analyses.
Yeah, so that would be my second question. I know we're not through all the data yet, but this is looking at 18-19. Is there a 3-year look of the same students? How much movement? So if they move up 1 year, do they slide back the next? And if that's noise or?
And I think that's smart because that's one of the things I've talked about. Like that would be the kind of thing to help us disentangle this whole regression to the mean issue. And so let's say you have a student who's very low performing and they might even be at a chance level of performance on the test. That student may get a bounce just because chance worked more in their favor in a subsequent year. They didn't learn more. They just had a more favorable chance outcome. So looking at patterns should help us to disentangle that. So here, this is the impact of adding a level 3C. All grades are combined here. And just to orient you to what we're looking at, the column totals show the percent of students that are earning some kind of growth points, either 1 or 1.25 in each of those levels. So you can see like 69.2% of level 1 students are earning growth points. And by the way, the top table is a current model with the current levels. The bottom table is where we plopped in a third level for level 3. So it's shown as like a 5.5. And so you can see 69.2%, 57.3%, and then it goes to 44.2% for level 3, which affirms what many of you said you were noticing, that fewer students are getting growth points in level 3. And then you'll see it bounces back to 75.3 in level 4 and 66.4 in level 5. And I think there's a pretty obvious reason for that, which is because at that point you get rewarded for stability. At that point, you don't have to move levels in order to get points. As long as you don't decline, you get points. So hopefully some of this is starting to come together to tell a coherent story now, because by looking at the patterns in the data, we've already seen that students grow at higher rates when they are lower score, when they score at lower levels on the test. They grow at lower rates on the higher end, but because they get rewarded for stability, we're getting a higher percentage of those students getting growth points. And then on the level 1 and 2, you're seeing the effect of the higher growth in those rates. So level 3 really stands there and contrast to where you say, well, why is it 44.2% there, whereas it's 69, 57, 75, and 66 for the others. And it's both the combination of the fact that growth is quite stable in that region, and there's no reward for staying in place. You've got to actually move from 3A to 3B in order to get growth points.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know, Mr. Burrow, maybe you, what was the rationale behind, we used to just have 4 levels and then we went to 5. What was the rationale to going to 5 levels? We used to have just a minimum, basic, proficient, advanced. And then we added that 3. What was the rationale? Like when did, I can't remember when that came into play, and what was the rationale behind having that 3?
So it would have been in the 15-16 school year.
Had to be.
It was when MAP was implemented that we went to 5 levels.
Yeah, I was
That's
just
right,
trying.
that's
I was just trying. I was just wondering what was
14,
it?
15 was the park year.
15.
That's right.
And it had to do with that whole transition.
Yeah, right.
13, 14 was the last year.
Because we went from
Right.
MCT2 to Park to MAP
Yeah.
during that 3 years.
And it became a law, or it became a, like, you had no option. I don't remember where that came from.
Yeah, and we never, we probably said this at the last meeting, never really liked the term pass for to identify that 3rd level. And I don't know.
It had something to do with that common, well, I don't know what I was supposed to say that word.
It might have
The
just
old
been a JP
curriculum,
rule. I mean, who knows? Like JP's not here anymore, so we just blame everything on JP. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I just, I mean, it seemed like when you add that 3, you add that 3, and I'm telling you, like, it's just the concept of passing. When I grasped this, that 3 was passing, and I know we talked about what that was for 3rd grade, but it was 2 at first. Then it went to 3, but we let seniors, if they get a 3, it's passing. So I'm still stuck on why do we add that in the model in the beginning? I don't know the history behind it, but it wasn't there in the beginning. Why did it get placed there, and what's the value of it? If it's there, it should have a value if it's there.
Well, I think a lot of it stems back to what Ryan was saying, is when they transitioned to the new assessments in 14-15 and multiple states were part of consortia, most states have 5 achievement levels. And so they went to the 5 achievement levels when they were part of the consortia. So when PARC was in place, it was levels 1 through 5. I think the better question to be asking is, why do we permit a level 3 for passing for graduation? And that's as much of a policy political question as it is, why do you call for proficient? And so most states want students to be proficient in meeting grade level expectations, and that's how when you had your standard setting for your current assessment, that Mississippi educator said a student who's at grade level in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade should be able to answer at least these items right in order to be considered proficient, and that's how those achievement levels got started. But then when you look at it for exit exam requirements, if you look at just the percent of students that are proficient to earn a standard high school diploma, that wouldn't fly politically, you know, that you couldn't just graduate 40-some% of your students, and so they looked at what is good enough for graduation rather than what is grade level proficiency. So it's, if you ask the question in a different way, it gives you a different answer, but Mississippi educators are the ones that decided what proficient is for each grade level based on your standard setting procedures. Your legislature decided what passing was to earn a standard high school diploma. So I think that's the challenge that we're working with, and it's not unique to Mississippi. There are a lot of states that are in the same position. It's the same way with 3rd grade progression, what's good enough to move to 4th grade versus what's grade level proficient on reading, is because it's not, I hate to say it, politically feasible to have that many students held back in 3rd grade or that few students graduating. And so that's why they use that passing term rather than proficient, or what we would expect a grade level student to be able to do. So it's
So it's like we add that, okay, we say that sounds better than a student graduating with a 2. So we add a 3 because it sounds better politically, but it's not working. It may not be the best thing for schools.
Well, I don't think that's why they added an achievement level. I think the achievement level was added simply because most states have a more drawn out achievement level, just more granular way to look at student achievement level descriptors. They have 5 different buckets on how they do that, and as part of the consortia, that's the direction they went, and they've held on to that legacy. So
Seems like somebody would have identified what that means to us. I don't understand you saying a consortium, and we just went with a consortium, and most states have 5, but it seemed like we would have identified better,
But you did,
what.
because when you went to your state assessment that wasn't PARC, they decided to retain those 5 achievement levels. It was Mississippi educators that came together and said, this is what achievement 1 level descriptors look like. A student who's in achievement level 1 should demonstrate these skills and qualities, and did that for each of the 5 levels. That would have been the time and place that they would have gone back to 4, but, you know, there was a pretty cognizant decision that was made at the department.
There's, I don't know this will be any more clarifying to you, Superintendent, but it's, I think one of the reasons, and we're actually seeing a lot of states move in this direction, particularly when states have rigorous standards for achievement, having more levels to distinguish gradations below proficient is seen as instructive, so that you can sort of better inform progress. So there's actually, I work with a few states that are trying to add a 3rd level, or trying to add another level below proficient, because they're saying it's just too coarse in that region. You know, it's like, saying we're only going to report, success or failure if a batter has a batting average of 500 or higher. You're going to say, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of batters batting at 200, 300, 400, and those are meaningful differences. Can we not get some information in that region? So I think that was partially a desire to get some information in that region.
So what is the name of a 3? 1 is minimum, 2 is basic, 4 is proficient, 5 is advanced. What is a 3? But Mr. Burrows said in the last meeting, it really was approaching Like, what do I tell a parent if your child scored 3 on it? What do we say, Mr. Barrow?
I've said met the
Especially in
standard.
third grade.
I've said
Third grade, you
over the course, I've said met the standard. And left it at that. That's just what I've
That's
said.
what I'm saying. You saying something, I'm saying something. Ryan, help me out. What are y'all, if y'all kids score 3, what do y'all tell parents?
Met the graduation requirement, or you met the requirements of literacy-based promotion?
What about 7th grade?
We say you scored level 3.
So I'm the only one saying they passing?
We don't label it.
Yeah.
I just don't label it.
I just feel like that 3, we don't need to be all saying different things. We need to identify what's a 3, what does it mean? If it's passing for 3rd grade, it's you met Literacy-Based Promotion Act, okay, you met graduation requirements, you passed. That's what we say.
So
Then what does a 3 actually mean?
I'll read it. It says, students at the passing level demonstrate general mastery of the knowledge and skills required for success in the grade or course in the content area. These students are able to perform approaching or at the level of difficulty, complexity, or fluency specified by grade level content standards.
So that's what I tell them.
I'll tell you what I tell them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do a whole form letter and I explain it that if there are 3, they know enough to be able to be okay in the next grade level. They're not proficient, but they can survive in the next grade level with a little extra help. They'll be fine, but you get in the weeds with it. And,
So the school report that comes is pretty good and descriptive. It's written in a letter format to a parent's basic language. I mean, to be honest, so I don't know. Honestly, I don't get tons of questions from grades 4 through 8 parents about it. I get tons from 3rd grade high school.
And we just said you have the basic foundation for that grade level. That's how we communicated, just like Ryan, and we said you have the basic foundational skills for that grade level. You're not proficient, but you're approaching.
Yeah, if you want to speak terms with parents understand, you could correlate it to a grade. Advance is an A, proficiency B, C is pass, 3, 4.
Don't say pass now, you gotta be careful.
I'm just saying, C, you pass with a C.
And that goes back to the point, then why is it not, why does a student scoring a 3B and staying a 3B don't get the growth? And I know that's what we're discussing, but I'm still really pushing that. Why, if that, what you read, that whole statement right there kind of sums up my argument is, if I'm that,
But they're approaching.
but if I'm all, no, I was more than approaching, if I'm all of that, but I don't get any growth points, but I'm all of that, I've done well from one grade to the next, but I don't get any growth points because I didn't get to proficiency. That's what I'm saying.
So you're definitely bringing up the policy side of it. Is staying in level 3 an accomplishment that, as a matter of policy, should be rewarded? That's the question you're asking. Yeah, yeah. And all I'm doing is.
And can we actually define a 3? Like we do the other performance?
Yeah. I'm just honoring your question by saying that's not a technical question, that's a policy question. And it's one that if this group wants to weigh in on, we'd be glad to record your voice on that, yeah.
Well, I mean, I can. That question about level 3 getting credit has been around as long as I've been with the department, and so it's been 7 years. And the department's always taken the position that the high water mark goal is proficient. So any incentive that the department can place to push students to proficiency, the department is going to do, because that's the expectation is proficiency. So if a student's languishing below proficient, the expectation is that they become proficient. And I can say that because I've been saying it for 7 years. And it hasn't changed. Now, I understand the challenges from the district standpoint around, and we see it in the data we saw today. Students not growing as much when they're in level 3 as they are in the lower levels. And to some extent, that's a reflection of what we would expect
Yeah, although I will say, I mean, when we see the pronounced growth for very low-performing students and the predictable declines for very high-performing students, I do think we can set that aside and say, in the middle of the scale, there's no reason why growth shouldn't be observable. There's plenty of information in that region, and there are no, like, floor or ceiling effects. So I think it's a real finding that things are stable. But again, that's another conversation from, should we reward progression within that level, or should we reward stability in that level? And I think Alan's accurately saying there's a reason why stability has only ever been pegged to 4 and 5, because those are the goal levels. I'll just finish while I've got the floor. I'll just finish with showing what this reveals, and then go on to ELA, and then let's fully open this up for your comments and suggestions. So with this, so you see the little arrows pointing, that's the headline here. What would happen if you added a 3C based on what we looked at in the legacy data? You'd go from 44.2% of students in level 3 getting growth points to 46.8% of students. Not a substantial bump, but 2% of many tens of thousands is something. And if you're sitting there thinking, I want to know how that plays out by school or region or student group, those are all good questions. I don't have that for you now, but those could be the focus of future inquiry if that's where we want to go. We'll look at ELA, where the bump is a little more pronounced, which I think follows the data. So you'll see that without a 3C, it's 37.8% of students in level 3 that get growth points. That goes to 46.6. So you get, about 9% of students that would get a growth bump. And we did see that there's more growth in ELA. So that probably doesn't shock us there. And so that's rewarding some of the movement in that range. And I believe that's our last slide. I think, is there another slide? It's probably just to wrap up and yeah. So as expected, we talked about this. Growth declines for students at higher levels. Growth was relatively stable. And yeah, adding a 3C has a modestly favorable impact for math, so almost 3%, and a more substantial impact for ELA, almost 9%. But I'll just open the floor. What are your questions? What are your observations? What are your recommendations here?
The 3C was one option, but was there not another option?
I was saying that the students, if they get to 3B and they remain 3B, I don't know if you ran that test or not, but that's the one that I was. 3C may be similar data, but the one that I particularly was discussing as a 3B, if I'm 3B and I remain at 3B.
We do not have those data, but I'll put that in the notes.
So level 6 here would be 3B. Well, I'm looking at the top table. So that's the way the model is now. So if you were in level 6, you were 3B, and we had.
Oh, I see. You have 16,074 that got 0 points.
We had 20,273.
Oh, I may be on math. Are you on ELA?
Oh, ELA.
Yeah, okay. I see now. 20,073. 273. Yeah, let me pull up my calculator here.
Those would be not just those that remained in, but could have fallen from. Yeah, they're saying 20,273 kids in ELA 6, level 3, 6, so the 3B didn't meet growth, but we don't know if they didn't meet growth because they remained in level 3B or because they
went down from level 4. So it won't be any more than that, but it might be less than that.
I think I can estimate that. Let me see.
Looking at the number of kids that were 3B level 6, he's wanting to know the number of kids that were 3B and stayed 3B and give growth points for that. But that 20,000, some of those could have stayed 3B, but some of them could have.
I ran it for our district. Again, we're a microcosm of the state. We have everything everybody has in one. And the same data, 18, 19. And I can tell you it's about 10.9 total points for the district with 3C, and it's going to be about the same exact amount with keeping, if they stay 3B, giving half of them.
That's why it could be about the same.
So you'll find, what you'll find is everybody else is going to be probably on both sides of that a little bit. We're going to be in the middle.
What's the percent that remains? Just curious.
I'm sorry?
The percent that remains?
10.9.
Percent that remained it? Yes, actually. I have that somewhere. I can do it real quick. I got the numerator right there. I just didn't put the denominator. It was about the same, about 46. Which is why I think the points worked out about the same. But that's just one district. That would differ everywhere. But I do think the points it would be somewhere in the middle. There's one thing we got to think about with the points, and Stephen brought this up, but it's a great point. You know, this wouldn't go into effect for the accountability season we're about to enter. The test we're doing right now, it would go into effect the next year. The test we're going to do next year will growth at the 3 through 8 level is going to be super hard this year. You didn't know that. It is going to be. And next year, it'll be a little bit more back to normal. If you get to a certain threshold, you have to reset cuts. You got to think about that. Huh?
I said, knock on wood, it's gonna be back to normal next year.
Well, I mean, it'll be more back to normal than this year. This year, it's 700 skills plummeting.
Well, I think, at this point, if we were talking about a major change to something in accountability, it would be something we would change during the next academic year and give districts notice for the next academic year.
I've always said, I don't think we should base this on points. I mean, I don't know we should base anything on points, but I don't. I think it should be a strategic argument. And I remember when we talked about this in 2019, one thing Dr. Domaleski said when he ran this data, or probably had dared to do it but analyzed it, was basically, and this made sense to me because I think it's common language, but, and he said this a while ago, 3 is the last level where you have to move forward.
Right.
So just use your common sense. The percentages are going to be lower growth there than everywhere else. It's a bottleneck. And so I actually played a game in our district, and I created a 4A, 4B, and a 5A to see if it just kept doing this. And guess what it does? It keeps doing this. Because those levels were harder to move forward. And so I see it both ways. Like I agree with there's a 3 issue, but why is there a 3 issue? I don't know. There's a lot there. I don't know that's clear. And I also don't want to do something where it's going to cause cuts to reset in 2 years, and we don't see that happening, and we cause cuts to get reset and pushed everybody back. I mean, to this 10% deal and all this stuff, because now we've punished everybody when the state was moving forward, and we should not do that. So we've got to be cognitive of that. Anything you decide. So I see it both ways. Long story short, I understand. You know.
But did we have more C's, A's, and B's this year than we ever had?
We did.
So when will we reach that?
We were close last year.
That's what I'm saying.
Very
So,
close.
so when do you think you see that happening?
Well, now you start add. I mean, I don't say adding points, but you do this, and everybody's going up. At, you know, than what they would have been. You see what I'm saying? Now this year, it ain't gonna happen. High school is gonna be through the roof. I mean, it's that 1,000 scale, through the roof. But the 700 scale is going to be low. Well, that makes up most of your district accountability. So it is not a threat this year. No. But, you know, next year, things start getting more back to normal. And we make progressions as things get back to normal. This state has shown that. So as things start getting back to normal, where are we? I don't know. It'll be so unknown. This year's not unknown. This year is the slingshot of last year, just being straight up. Next year, it's more back to normal. What is the normal now? Do you know? I don't know. I've never done data 3 years out of COVID before, so I don't know. So that's why it makes me nervous to go into it blind. I would almost want to do something like we did with the EL component or whatever, where it's not official. You know, what would it look like? You know, those kind of things, you know? But if we did anything.
I'm thinking, what seems like a valid argument for change is if districts are able to move students in level 3 that we've established are difficult to move, but are not getting credit for that growth. And you know, how do we establish that that's occurring, and what can we do to change that?
Yeah, so whenever we look at growth, there's two questions that we care about. One is the student demonstrating progress? And the second is it meaningful progress? And, you know, one of the advantages to the growth approach that Mississippi uses, which is used in many, many states, is that meaningfulness is built into the model. And it is, you know, so it's very transparent, it's easy to replicate, it's easy to explain, and there are, that's why many places call this value tables, is because you can bake the values right into the design. And you can say, we want to award points for meaningful progress from this point to this point. And so that's why it kind of goes back to the question about, do you regard, if you advocate for a 3C, do you regard movement from 3B to 3C as meaningful improvement? And if you regard stability in 3B as worthy of points, do you regard that as a meaningful prized accomplishment? These aren't technical questions. These are policy questions. We've seen, so I'm convinced that the model isn't artificially masking growth. In other words, if we'd seen, you know, the average student is improving a lot in level 3, but it's just not moving the needle from the value table, I think it'd be another question. I think we've seen that students in Mississippi have shown, at least the data we've done, it's all confounded by this crazy post-pandemic world we live in now, where we're trying to get a clearer sense of the data. But looking before the pandemic, we saw very stagnant levels of performance in that region. And I'm sorry, you hear no answers coming from me because I don't have answers. They're just, that's why we put this group together, is because it is a policy decision by leaders and thinkers that are in this room.
And I don't want to hear you. I'm not saying we should look at it. I think we should look at it. I just think we need to have some stages and be careful before we just do, and like, I mean, not that we have the power to do anything, make a recommendation, because like we're going into a slingshot year this coming year, and in the next year, we don't know what it's going to look like for the first time. Like everybody predicted what it's going to look like this last year, everybody's can predict what it's going to look like this year, for what scale. Next year, that's when it's off the table. We're sort of back to normal. So what does it look like then? What's the new normal? So it makes me a little nervous to just make decisions 2 years out, you know, kind of thing. And it's final, you know, that's our recommendation. I like that whole, well, let's run some, what do we call that, Niels, when we did that year? You know, like you would have been this, if this was in play, but, you know, all that stuff. Some things like that, maybe.
So I agree with Ryan to like figuring out what does normal look like, but also Chris says what I always say too, is this progress meaningful to students or not? And are we just looking at this now in the context that, you know, we've had a couple COVID years, we're not, you know, totally back to normal yet. Do we need to refocus, you know, instead of some areas back to making sure kids get to proficient, so they have command knowledge of grade level stuff to be successful in the following year. And then also, you know, if there is a 10 to even greater point change, and we see a huge skew just for schools getting more points, there will be that conversation of, do we need to reset cut scores? And that could mean a lot of bigger things. And so now we have less rigorous expectations for students and more rigorous expectations for schools. And I think it should always be more rigorous expectations for schools and give on the A through F cut score points. So I think maybe premature to make decisions on this, but keep watching it. And then the other thing I'd like to see too for future analyses is looking for the meaningfulness of students. If we do continue to look at or try and promote just either a stability or move to 3C, that we track student progress longer than just 1 year to the next. That we're looking at the meaningfulness of it, of a student that's progressing from 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th, rather than just 4th to 5th. Because 1 year, anything can happen. 2 years, let's see what goes on. In 3 years, let's see what moves from there too. Because that could also cause more instability within level 3, where kids are going up and then they're coming back down and don't get points, and they're going up again and they're coming back down and don't get points. So,
And that was my question to Ryan. When you ran your data, did you just do it for one grade? Because I know we ran our data in the district. What we saw moving from 4th to 5th is easier because I had to know less, I would just say, for math. But when they transitioned from 5th to 6th is where we saw it was hard, those 3 Bs. We saw a decline. And then we take a rebound for our 7th grade year, but then when our 8th grade data rolls out, we take a decline. So that's what we saw with ours. And then we said, okay, could be that our teachers, we do need to increase the level of rigor, you know, that's our teachers are teaching. But also, is it a big difference with how much they need to know in order to be proficient for the next grade level?
It is.
And that's I was thinking maybe something we need to look at as well, you know.
It does.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
So.
I don't like to look at my kids as points, and if we get so many points and then we gotta do a reset and we gotta do this, which I understand the business rules and the laws and things around so many schools. What I'm saying is, shouldn't we be measuring how effective schools are of doing what she read for that description of 3? How effective are schools in making sure, help me, William, making sure that schools and are helping students meet that standard to be successful as they progress from grade to grade versus, oh, well, we get too many schools here, we're gonna have to do what are we measuring? I'm measuring if we did have a 3C. And we're saying, okay, schools gain more points but what are we measuring? We're measuring that statement. If you don't mind reading it again, I appreciate it. If that's what we're measuring and students are doing it and our state and our districts are meeting that standard and they're doing well, we're talking about the reset, and I don't want to see that. I've been, I'm gonna say, a victim of the reset. But if we're truly measuring that teachers and districts are getting to that threshold that we're saying they're not proficient, but I don't think they stop progressing because I'm gonna continue to move my district and gain more points when they do become proficient. So I'm not gonna stop. I don't know a teacher in my district that can educate a child and say, well, we got you to a 3B, you only need these amount, right? And we're gonna stop right here with you because we know you're gonna get a 3. Everybody's gonna continue to work to move their children to proficiency, to continue to gain more points and to raise the accountability of their districts. I don't think anybody's gonna stop because we add a 3C or you remain a 3B and you get points there. I don't think anybody's gonna stop moving toward proficiency. And I know you say you've been fighting that battle for 7 years, But I don't know a teacher in my district or principal or anybody that's gonna stop when the child reach a 3B and say, well, we're not gonna try to get them to a 4.
Well, we hope they don't stop at 4 either.
Right, exactly. So why are we saying, well, we can't do anything in the 3 because the goal is to become proficiency, like we're gonna stop. We're not gonna stop. Nobody in this room is gonna stop. Can you read that for me one more time?
Passing. Student at the passing level demonstrate general mastery of knowledge and skills required for success in the grade or course in the content area. The students are able to perform approaching or at the level of difficulty, complexity, or fluency specified by grade level content standards. The difference between the passing, or the main difference between the passing is these students are able to perform approaching versus these students are able to perform at the.
Right, and that's why we continue to work. But that statement says a lot of what a teacher is doing. It's not a 1. I know kids can score a 1 without a teacher. You can score a 1 without a teacher. You can almost score a 2 without a teacher. But when you start getting to 3 and approaching 4, that just tells you the quality of work that is going on, especially in districts where I may have a long-term sub in the classroom teaching. And they're still able to reach. It's work going on in districts that's not being, I'm not gonna say rewarded. It's work going on in districts that's not being recognized. And it really, you're talking about a mindset, and I've been around the Delta my whole career. And I have been in schools where I remove all barriers off the table, and we've moved those schools. In my current district, we moved prior to the pandemic. But I know the struggle in the Delta area schools. I know the struggle when you don't have certified teachers. And it's a mindset, and when you keep kicking me when I'm down, it's like you feel like, why am I even trying when I'm only gonna be aired out as the bottom 10 statewide, nationwide every year? It's like you kicking me when I'm down. And that mindset that, well, you're a D or an F because you couldn't get enough proficiency or whatever, I feel like something needs to happen that will level or recognize the hard work that's going on in some of those districts. And I've been a part of them. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Just an observation. Agree with you, everyone's working hard, and it's showing up in national results, and Mississippi is consistently held up as a national example for improvement in student outcomes, namely because of their high expectations. So I just know that what has been happening in the last decade here with high expectations, no excuses type of attitude has really worked and catapulted Mississippi forward. So just hope that tradition continues and that we continue to look at those more rigorous expectations, not what schools and students are doing, but what they're capable of doing moving forward too. So get it, understand it, respect it, but just know that these high expectations have served the state really well over the last decade.
Other perspectives? Let's give people space to share your thoughts about this.
Just to what Lawrence was talking about, I think it goes, and we talked about this earlier, just we have to consider the reporting of some of the things. Because I can't empathize with you because thank the Lord that Oxford's not in the bottom 10 in proficiency or whatever. I hope we never get there, right? But I can certainly sympathize of how that might feel when you get the report that has the top 10 and the bottom 10, right? And I can sympathize how your teachers may feel, when that happens. So going back to that reporting thing, maybe that's something that we could consider. I don't have a problem with the top 10 or whatever, but I don't know. I can see how the bottom 10 may be a morale killer for a lot of folks. But I also see the value in it, because I'm also a competitive person too, and I can say, my gosh, I'm not gonna be in the bottom 10 next year, right? So that's a different, maybe a different switch for different people. But I don't think that's really anything for here, other than just to consider the State Department considering how things are reported out. So I can certainly understand that.
I've always felt like if a decision is made here, 3C always made more sense to me than points for staying 3A or 3B. And the reason is, well, we're still asking to move forward. We just shrunk it. And so if you did anything, that always made sense to me because, again, it is the last level where we're asking for movement forward. And just not asking, did you regress? So to the previous. So, I mean, I've never really liked, to be honest with you, it makes sense to me, the whole, because again, you want to incentivize anything, or not incentivize anything, that's what I meant to say, but like, if you say, all right, 3B, we're gonna let you, you're gonna get anything for that, I totally agree with you, people are not gonna stop, it's nothing like that, but it's just a different mindset with, well, hey, you still move forward, so we're just changing that bar, reducing it. It's an easy deal to do on the scale score, the levels. It's really easy. It works out in math, to have 3 levels there. But again, I still would say what I said earlier, whatever. It's you got to be careful, think about it. I'd like to see. I don't know if I would love to. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably, but we're talking about so many issues that are not going to be solved in a month, right? All these issues that we talked about, especially this morning, like this is like long-term big stuff, right? So I don't know if we're planning on meeting this summer, when we have data from this year. Again, the only thing about that is we got to be careful because that's the second year of the slingshot. It ain't gonna look like that next year, but it still gives us some sort of idea. Because we're looking at pre-pandemic data, that's different. And so, just the more we have to make a decision, because I do agree with Dr. Nomaleski, eventually you get to a policy decision. I mean, we can talk about, is there a level 3 problem? Should we have anchored the math test in level 3 and all these things that happen in 15? We can talk about all that, but I mean, everybody's gonna have different views. But like in the end, like it comes down to policy to some level there and how you view that. So the more data that we have, the more information we have, and we don't do something, as Joanne Malone, is she in here? Always says, what do we always say we don't want to have? Those not unforeseen.
Unintended consequences.
And so we just need to make sure of that.
Just, nobody's going to want to hear this, but it's possible that if you go to 3C, that some schools will get lower growth scores. That some schools could get lower growth scores. Because if you divide up that region that's right now divided in 2 into 3, so somebody who might have been just on the outside of 3B is now going to be, they may have moved from 3A to 3B, would now be moving within 3B. So obviously that would show up in the impact data. We see that more often than not, it has a favorable result. But I promise you, we will see some schools go down, just inevitable.
That's why
Yeah.
if we get a change like this, we would
Yeah.
do it before the school year started.
Yeah.
So this is it, so accordingly.
And my guess is that's going to make your phone ring when that school notices that.
A school with any substantial denominator, it would even out and they would rise. But a small school with a very small denominator, you could have some weird situation.
So it's probably a good reason to run this at a school level, to run this at group levels if we're serious about exploring 3C. But again, I think we've said this and affirmed it a couple times in the course of the discussion. We should at some point decide how much of this is analyses we want to do to understand something this committee supports versus hearing the voice of the committee and saying, we're going to move on to other things until or unless this is a priority. It's not that we're afraid of hard work. We'll do all the analysis, but it's having a signal from this committee about how you want to proceed is helpful to us.
I definitely would want to see it tested and see the impact. I definitely would want to see that. I mean, with real data from maybe this upcoming year before something actually went into play. I just, because I know we got a lot of other indicators that's still on the table post-COVID, so, but I would like to just see the impact.
I mean, it'd be interesting to even see if there's been a change in the distribution of students across these levels since 2018.
Right.
Yeah.
We could have fewer students in level 3.
I have a question. If this was to go into play and they go from a 3A to a 3C, would that be 1 point or would that be 1.25?
It's another wrinkle, right? Yeah.
We kept it one. It's two proficiency levels.
Right.
My data, and I think y'all's data, she did just one.
So what I'm hearing is, you do want to, again, others should weigh in. I'm just trying to summarize what I'm hearing. It sounds like the task force is not ready to dismiss a change to the growth model. And in order to continue to move forward from an informed perspective, I've made a note about Christy's recommendation that we see this over time. I support that recommendation. I think that's important. I think we need to see this by school. I think we need to see how this impacts schools, and I think we need to see it with recent data. So I see Deborah left the room. Yeah. And to answer your question, she did some of it, I did some of it, but she does most of it most of the time, yeah.
What would be the best way you all would report that? Would that be something you all would share with each district, or would it be something that, like we've done in the past where we've made changes to the model when you show what a school was with this, next to this, or would it be shared with each individual district? What would be the report method for that test?
We would report back to this group and we'd probably mask who schools were.
100%.
We would just do like, this number of schools would have a positive impact, this number of schools would have no impact. So that's what it would look like, something like that.
Yeah, and we should probably find a way to do it so that we could condition on, like, even if we conditioned on overall grade, like, here's how it affects all the schools that scored A and all the schools that scored B, this kind of thing. I think that helps us make strong decisions about the impact of the model. Okay, we've got some homework to do.
We knew that was coming.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hear what the next discussion is. I might need you to read it again. I'm gonna wait on the next time.
Approach it versus.
Circle it right on that.
Yeah, I was joking. I've never been in a meeting where I've shared data and everybody said, that was so clarifying. That's exactly what we need. Let's make a decision. The reaction, again, so I say it with a smile, and I'm happy to do it, that the reaction is always like, oh, that's interesting. Could we do this, that, and the other now? So, yeah. Very good. We are ahead of schedule. I don't know if our friends who are coming to share with us about chronic absenteeism are able to accommodate the fact that we're ahead of schedule. It's okay if they're not. If not, we could do a couple things. We could take a break, and we could actually start the round robin, and then, okay. And then we could,
You want to hear that?
yeah. And then we could, and in fact, why don't we do that, friends? Why don't we, because we're not due for break for another half hour. Why don't we do the round robin now? You got to leave anyways early. And then let's take a break. When we come back, we'll have a fairly succinct session with chronic absenteeism, and we can probably adjourn early today. I think we're about on schedule.
Oh, okay, perfect, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
We just got it.
We're going to spend a half hour just now doing the round robin. Okay, so we're going to start the round robin. Remember, the ask is reflect on anything that will help us plan for future meetings. If you want to emphasize topics that came up that require follow-up, bring in new topics that you want us to have on the radar. So it helps us prepare for future meetings. And we'll start with Christy because we know she has to adjourn early. So and then we'll go around the room this way. You want to go the other way? Okay. Okay. All right, we're going to hear from Lindsay. She's going to start us off.
I guess the only burning question I have, Dr. Hudson, when he's got non-certified teachers in the classroom and he's still able to move some students, how do we recognize that growth? That he's playing with a different team than the rest of us are, and how do we equalize?
And I'm speaking for region. Because I'm fortunate enough now to be in the situation I am, that I don't have that particular problem. But I have been in schools. When I was in Yazoo City, we moved every year till we got to a C, even with the resets. But I did not have them. I had TFAs, I had non-certified. We were moving every year. And the reset will kind of knock us down, and then we'll come right back. But it's work that go on in those schools that's my neighbors that I feel like are working hard to get to that point with no results in the end.
I teach at SLLA all over the state and
Yeah.
different universities, and I know that you're telling the truth.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Still pondering.
That's okay. We snuck up on you. We did this quicker than anybody expected.
But at the last round table, I spoke about ensuring we're focused on, really what student achievement looks like. And, with the current model, and I echo as well, I don't like any changes, right now, of course, but again, just as a task force, the essential question is, are we looking at truly what's, measuring student achievement? And it's really hard to, I'd say, kind of break that down, but I guess that's the overarching essential question as a task force, as MDE. How are we doing that, and how we're supporting schools in all of us having, again, that same common goal of student achievement and measuring such mark.
I don't have a burning question. One of my takeaways today was what we looked at earlier from the Chicago Public School District in Massachusetts. How they're being intentional on making sure that community see us more than just a test grade as far as academics, but bringing in that social, emotional, and culture and teachers and leadership piece as well as community and well-being. I think that today was a great discussion. Better work things.
Building off what she just said, I appreciate the department's acknowledgement of district models that extend beyond the accountability model and the willingness to department to be able to showcase or link to the district models that other school districts have across the state and extend past the accountability model. I certainly think that's a step in the right direction. As far as the accountability model itself, from the exercise this morning, again, I know that everybody or most are not about adding anything to, but I think if we are going to add something to it, should be strongly considered about the diploma options.
So I would definitely say I had a couple of things that kind of echo with them. Mine was the diploma option as well. I don't want to add it to accountability model. But I would like to see, we have that out there. I would definitely like to have more research or information in regards to how our scholars are, what track are they selecting or ending with. So more information and research around that would be very nice. Also, just like Dr. Hudson said, how different ways to shout out what the districts in our schools are doing. We had to think about ways. I just finished telling Mr. William here, we're not yet a proficient district, but we're moving towards, and all of our scholars are moving well, and we're very proud of the things accomplishing in Jackson Public Schools. So we had to be really, really innovative and shouting out our schools with the arrows and how they're comparing to themselves. And, you know, saying, oh, you were second within, you know, from last year in bottom 25 or whatever. So we had to find those good things. So continue to sharing, you know, other ways that we can spotlight the great things that are happening in the district. And then I also want to make sure that I thank Alan. Alan has consistently answered every question. I know I emailed to death, you know, you and Ryan, I emailed to death about it. But I am quite pleased because every time I email in regards to the accountability standards or rules, accountability rules, asking for different clarity, all of those were the ones that showed up in our notes. So I'm pleased about that, which brings me to say, just continue fleshing out those, because what I'm finding is that surrounding districts, not just me asking questions, we're all asking those questions. So I think if we have a better understanding of what this rule entails, what it means, we will then see our schools perform even better. So I appreciate that. I'm sorry.
I want to say, well, I applied to be on this task force because I'm always a lifelong learner. I think I'm probably the lowest on the totem pole as a principal. I don't have those fancy district positions. But being able to be in a room with small district, large district, successful and non-successful, it does open your eyes regardless if it's a proficient district or not. And having networking abilities to be able to talk about the things that people are doing is always a benefit, regardless if you're already doing well, if you're not. Some of the takeaways I had was, one of the things I wrote down for myself was telling all sides of the story. We have districts that have very proficient districts, but then we don't necessarily know where the children are going or how well they're doing in their economic parts of the community. Well, we have some who may not finish school, but these are some of the people who are now our entrepreneurs and our biggest businesses that we have. So how do we tell that story and meet the requirements that we have for the the grants or federal funding that we have? And then just I think somebody already mentioned, what does achievement look like? It looks different in all aspects that we do. So right now, for the last couple of years, when I've attended MASS and some other conferences, a lot of districts have started going into telling my story scenarios at their local level because of the things that have been asked of them. And I've seen in the last 2 years that become a bigger play of conversation, because we want everyone to know that our kids and our teachers, I'm from the same area as Mr. Hudson, and it's very difficult when you're looking at teacher retention, a lot of teachers who are not traditional educators, and then you're moving. But you're excited at the local level, but nobody else understands how it feels to have 50% traditional, 50% non-traditional, but they're still in there, making things move. What we covered thus far is pretty much what I'm still focused on. The next level readiness, that is like, I guess, a passion of mine. Workforce development's always been, always will be a passion of mine. And how do we take some of the things that we're looking at right now and I guess, again, pushing out that improvement piece. I would rather know how well I'm improving than this accountability model compared to myself. So that's it.
I think earlier when we had our group session, Ms. Crystal, she mentioned something and it has really stuck with me. And I think mine is a more immediate and pressing need, is to, when these children and teachers get ready to test these scholars who have been out for weeks, some of them don't have homes. Some of them are worried about what they're going to eat. And I know we're not doing a waiver and all this, but I think somebody needs to advocate and fight for them. It's not going to help me, so I don't have a dog in the fight. But we know how it is with a summer slide. We know how it is after coming back from a break. That's why we didn't start testing day. We was like, they're going to be all over the place from Easter Bunny candy. But these are children and parents who have bigger things on their minds, and to know that buses can't even get there. So what is their participation rate going to look like? So I think someone needs to be advocating to say, What are we gonna do specifically for them? Because we may look up and maybe the whole entire 10 names on the bottom list, and that will not be fair. I mean, I haven't got past that, so I don't know.
Thank you very much.
I didn't have any pressing questions, but I do want to say I'm thankful to be here and the learning and the listening and having those conversations with my colleagues, especially the activity this morning. I hope we're going to continue to talk about how we can progress with researching some of these things and adding them in. Definitely not in the accountability model, that is not what I'm saying, but just looking at how we can continue to look at how this can help our students and our schools. I do hope that we're going to talk about what we might do with that bottom list and making sure that we're not necessarily highlighting those schools, kind of echoing what she's saying, which schools might even end up being in those numbers, but some way to just show the progress that is happening with our schools and our districts.
To piggyback off Alicia, if we could hold harmless those tornado schools, I think that would be very beneficial. But I said this last meeting, and I'll say it again. I really want us to talk about growth. I like us talking about this level 3C, but I also want us to talk about students that go from minimal to passing, and they're only getting 1.25 points, and they're going up 2 levels. I feel like a 4 to a 5 is a 1.25. So for a child to go from minimal to passing, that's unbelievable. And I just feel like they should be rewarded more points than 1.25.
I just appreciate the willingness of the department to look at things differently, look at different measures. I really do, because I felt like for so many years, it's just, here it is. The only thing I would say is to cautiously, in whatever we decide to measure, just make sure that it is reliable and valid measures, because, I tell my people all the time, there's lies, there's darn lies, and there's statistics.
That was the PG version, wasn't it?
And then if you give me the survey questions, I can make that 5th dentist cave. The 4 out of 5 dentists, I can make that 5th one if I know how to ask those questions. That sort of thing. So it's just one of those things where there's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's hard to do that with the diversity of our districts and how that it's all set up. But I do think that we can find equitable measures that we can say this is a portrait of a student who's successful and a district who's being successful and moving towards preparing kids. One thing I think that when we talked about in our group that we didn't mention before that I thought is that we really got to be careful of our reach and how far, because we're K-12 institutions, and how far do we really need to reach out past that senior year after they graduate? And how far do we need to take on the responsibility for that person that's after graduation? Just being careful that we don't, always, talk about staying in lanes, just being in our lane and making sure that we don't get so spread thin and thinking about what it looks like. It's because you get that thing where kindergarten teachers blame parents, 1st grade teachers blame kindergarten parents,
yeah.
2nd grade, and it's kind of like you all just worry about where they are now, get them to where they need to be in the future, and so that if we start focusing on things that are past our scope of reach, then we can be distracted and forget the main reason why we exist. Sorry.
And I disagree with Ms. Jones. You were where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
A good principal is the key.
Yes.
So disagree with you completely. So I again give MD praise for these, just anything's open to discussion, and that's really, it's just good conversation, and we haven't gotten anywhere, but on the flip side, we are discussing things, and that's a step. I'm going to bring up the same thing I think I brought up the last 2, in count for school improvement. I'm probably going to be the main one that cares, because again, we're very, very large. But I know there's not a lot of options, but again, we have about 40, just being straight up with you, about 40% of the eligible schools in the state, and that ain't right. When everybody else has So, anyway, there's just some things, and Jackson Public is in there with us, and there's only about a few districts that honestly are represented, when everybody has students with disabilities, so that we need to look at.
I've been meaning to ask on that point, and certainly we can open it for discussion in the future meeting, but, as far as the in-count minimum, how do you feel about if the in-count minimum was dropped to, let's say, 5 for the whole system?
I understand it's not as statistically valid and that kind of thing. I've almost wondered if there's some sort of percentage base. Can you go to a percentage base of your total students with disabilities enrolled in the school, or I don't know, population? Like, look at options like that as opposed to just dropping. Because I know once you get below 10, it's a little iffy if it's statistically reliable. I completely admit that. So and there's people on here that would be against that. I'm well aware of that. But if we go to a percentage base, if that's a possibility, that's something I would like to look at, because right now it's just strictly a strict number in 10, and every one of our schools.
I think that's what's in federal
everybody
statutes.
else is going to be left out.
You
Because
have to
we run every component. We run every component.
Yeah.
And you're going to get small schools out at one of the components, where we're still in, and we're the only ones that can be identified.
We should totally, there's a lot I'd like to say about this, but the thing that I think we need to say right now is you have been reliable in bringing this to our attention. It's a very important issue, and its time has come. So I put a couple.
I'm the main one that cares, so nobody else is going to bring it up. 'Cause I don't mean that ugly, but right now they like it. It is how it is. I'm just being straight up. You're out of it. You don't really got to worry about it.
Well, it's interesting. It's also interesting because a couple of years ago, I remember the discussion being about increasing the in-count minimum. So but we could talk about it. Put it on the agenda.
But Ryan, I'm gonna push back on you. I think in all these open conversations, we really have gotten somewhere. Because there's these camps all around the state, and misconceptions that our intent was just to blow up the model and start over. Like, just when we have a state law that the model's in, that we can't change a lot without a technical amendment anyway. But I think there's consistency in the conversation where we talk, whether we're talking about the school model or the district model, that the notion of this group is to kind of keep what we have intact. We're open to some modifications here and there, but overall, let's keep what we've got. So, like, I think we really have gotten somewhere in all these open
by not getting anywhere, we've gotten somewhere to some point. What I mean is we've talked about it, we've evaluated it, and maybe there's nowhere to go.
Right. And everybody seems to really be on the same page. I mean, like, I thought there would be a lot of pushback from different folks, and then just laying it out on the table and being really open. I mean, it's like, and I kind of did the same thing a little bit with the MASA group when I was in Tupelo a couple weeks ago, particularly around the chronic absenteeism piece, because 35 or 37 other states included, and like some of the folks, and I was like, we don't care what 37 states do, like, let's talk about Mississippi, so. I agree. So it was pretty clear that they were on the same page. I was like, okay, that's exactly what the Accountability Task Force said about that, but.
You're right.
But the only way to really see where people stand, in my opinion, is through these activities that Dr. Domaleski has brought to the group over the last couple of months. So it's like, anything's on the table. Like, let's get it out there. Let's talk about it. And kind of we're back to where we started.
Agreed.
So I'll echo what Ryan was saying about in-counts. Count me in there as well, because we're a larger district, 23 schools, and we have a number who are also facing some of those challenges. I do like the conversation around telling our story, and if we do make adjustments, kind of touching along what Stephen was saying about how do you include ones that are objective, so that it allows for longitudinal comparability that maybe the shift again needs to be us having more conversation about comparability with our own data for school improvement sake. So appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I didn't know if I had already used my time.
No, sir. No, sir. You got time.
As long as you don't ask her to read it,
I guess what I'm lobbying, I've been on both sides. I've been a principal in 2 different F schools, 2 different F districts. And both of those, we were able to move them 2 levels. And then I got to be a superintendent. And in this district, it always fluctuated from a D to a C. For 21 years of the accountability, but before I got there was C to a D. And before the pandemic, we was able to get our district up to a B. So for the first time, I'm getting a chance to kind of sort of experience what it's like on that side. And my talk to the staff is to remain here. Some of the conversations that you all are probably having, it's harder to stay in A or B than it is to move a school from like an F or a D. It's harder to stay there. So for the first time, I was having that conversation, and my conversation changed. But then again, I can't sit here in this seat, having been on both sides, and still not advocate for things that I know caused me difficulties in moving my school and the negative perception we had, although I felt that we were much more, but it's about what the numbers say. But we were doing so much more. So I've been on both sides, and that's why I'm not saying the things that I'm talking about are necessarily affecting me directly, but I've been on both sides, and I know the struggles that my colleagues that I'm working with, trying to build collaboration with to help everybody in our region move their schools. So a lot of what I'm saying is not for me. I'm not a selfish person. I'm talking about my colleagues and others, because I've had to have that conversation about, you know, if we want to move toward an A, my district already know. They don't hear me talk about nothing but an A. If we're going to get there, certain work has to be done. But I know that when you 100% free and reduced lunch, and you poverty, I mean, everywhere, just about every family, you're going to continue to do this. And that 3s is what's going to continue to knock us from a B to a C, B to a C. If we ever get to an A, we might go from an A back down to a C. I really don't see with the work we're doing us going back to a D or an F. I hope and pray that that never happens. But if we go back to a B this year, which I do think so, the next year is highly possible with those. You can only take certain kids so far, but that don't mean you're not working and that you're not preparing those kids when they get to that spot. They just level out. And we often gonna fall back. We may go back up, we're gonna fall back. And it's really not reflective of what's happening in my district and some other ones. So I'm really, a lot of what I'm talking about is not even for my own district. I just want us to look at it and test it. And I know I've been a part of that reset. I know what happens when that happens. But then again, I'm not going to say that we shouldn't be able to celebrate our success because we're afraid of that at the same time. But I don't want to see it happen. I know I don't want to see that happen, the reset. I know that it's going to knock the success right back down and we have to start over again. It's going to be twice as hard to get back. But I do want to celebrate what is happening in our districts.
Need me to read it?
No, I think I got it.
Chris, thanks again for hosting and facilitating. You always do such a nice job, very diplomatic and non-biased, which is hard. And Paula and Alan, again, this is unprecedented to have a committee this long-standing with this many educators to come to a table and help drive policy decisions at the state level. I'm really excited about the district level opportunities. I do think we're gonna, in the next few years, hopefully see some really neat and innovative reporting metrics coming out of there, and maybe even a hopeful new accountability indicator. We've been searching long and hard for new things to add to accountability that are fair and reliable and valid and objective, and hopefully districts will have the answer for us. I'm also excited to hear the focus on students and the school improvement conversations really starting to take hold about, here's the information we want to look for best practices through reporting and see how we can do more school improvement efforts rather than just focusing on, you know, accountability and point alterations, but what does this mean for students and how do we change our practices at the school level? And just as always, thank you for continuing to have me back. I love being here. This is a fun group. We've been really ideologically consistent and very consistent in our rationale for what we want to include or not include, and not changing the accountability system always makes me really happy. So this has been great. Thank you.
I really don't have anything. I just want to follow up. If I appeared insensitive to like any waivers for the victims of the tornado in those districts early on, I certainly did not mean to be, because that has been at the forefront of our work and conversation since March the 24th. But I just, you know, we just don't feel like we have all the information. We have to be very careful. We're going to go back and look at what we've done in the past. I think we've handled some of these issues in years past. I've been around a long time, through the appeals process. And so Christy also brought that up about what some other states do too. And we just, as we move forward, we want to be able to be consistent, because this is unfortunately going to happen again at some point in the future. And we just, like I said earlier, we just don't feel like we have all the information we need at this time right now to bring that to this group, or even to have the conversations at a leadership level here, except for knowing these are conversations we're going to have, you know, based on the number of students that we know now are displaced and will likely not be able to participate in the assessment. So again, I just didn't want anyone to think that I was insensitive in the beginning, because it is definitely part of our daily conversation.
I don't have much. Just thank you, and Ms. Jones, I intentionally didn't put titles on these table tents because, you know, we want all levels of engagement in this room. So thank you. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your feedback today. And I feel like I've learned a lot, and we've got a few things that I think we can change pretty easily, you know, with our reporting. So.
Yeah, the department, you guys really are on the forefront with states, both in your commitment to standards and achievement, and in the transparency and openness with which you solicit feedback. So thank you. I say all the task force, we work together in planning these meetings, but these folks never bat an eye when we say, let's talk about these really out-of-the-box ideas. And they're like, okay, let's see what the task force has to say about it. So there's no guardrails. And as long as you give us good advice about priorities, I'm putting a star next to the in-count issue, we're going to continue to have you guys shape the agenda. I learned a lot from all of you. Thank you a lot. Like, you know, Ms. Jones, I wanted to say in particular, like, I learned just listening to you talk about your experiences with the FAFSA today. Like, things I didn't know, that I'm going to be better at my job because I know more about your experiences now, and I appreciate that you guys bring that to this room, and it helps us make really thoughtful decisions that are going to help students, and that's what it's all about. So it sounds like we're ending the meeting. We're not. We're going to go to a break. Please come back, even though it sounds like we're closing the chapter. We do. Yeah, Christy's got to catch a flight.
I'd already sent out
one final session today. And as we signaled before the break, I'm going to get out of the way here. I don't have a long prelude to say that at our last meeting, we honored the importance of promoting attendance and working against chronic absenteeism, even while there was a reluctance to roll it into the accountability model. And as you know, I think with task force, certainly signaled that anything we can do to learn more about resources and strategies to support and ways that we can keep it in the forefront would be something that'd be a good use of our time. So we're grateful for our colleagues. I'll let you guys properly introduce yourselves that can share more about what the agency's doing.
Good afternoon. My name is Amarie Littell, and I am the Executive Director of Health Education and Dropout Prevention. I have with me Mr. Dan Michelle, who is the Director of Dropout Prevention. We work very closely together. So thank you all for having us today, and thank you for including us in this discussion. As we all know, thank you. as we all know, that chronic absenteeism is very important, and school districts are struggling. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, how to get from point A to point B, because it's a moving target, and it's a lot of variables or barriers that cause chronic absenteeism. And how we count chronic absenteeism, you count the all of the truancy rate, you count suspension, late arrival, depending on how school districts are counting their absenteeism. But it's just not, the excused and unexcused absence are counted for chronic absenteeism. For truancy purposes, it's only the unexcused absence. So there's a difference. So as you see that our rate is at 28%, but that includes suspensions, excused absences and unexcused absence. So, and that number is very startling when you say 28% of our population is not going to school. So we know we must do something. What we must do, we must work together. We must continue to work with the courts. We must continue to work with parents to make sure that we engage students and want them to come to school. Make sure that the instruction that's being provided is very engaging to them in order for them to want to be involved in school. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle when some of our students are the primary caregiver for their families. If we would leave today, probably go to a McDonald's or Wendy's, we might find some of our students there. So do we tell students that you cannot support your family to have a roof over your head or food because they're leaving school during the daytime to go to work to help support their family? Of course, we don't want that to happen because we know the importance of education. So some of the things that we're going to try to do is come up with an action plan that we can work with school districts to see how we can address this. Talk with teachers about how can we engage students. So some of the causes of chronic absenteeism is bad grades. Now, if you're a 15-year-old and you cannot read, and so sometimes that it depends on how instruction is being provided. If we're calling students out, asking them to read aloud, and that's an issue. We know bullying is an issue. It's real. Safety is an issue. Transportation is an issue. So we have to find those root causes that is going to help us figure out how to address those issues. So we have to do community practice. We need to partner with the community. How can we keep our students in school? Of course, you all know that we have school attendance officer, and some district might have one, some might have two, but the most is probably three. So the district like Jackson Public School, 3 or 4, but with the numbers of students, 3 or 4 SAO officers, that's a daunting task for them when one school may have 2,000 students there, 1,500 students. On an average, most of our school attendance officers receive 1,500 referrals a week. And so they must go through that and do phone calls, do letters, do home visits to see what the problems are. And when they miss 5 days, it triggers something for us. We send letters, we send emails, and hopefully by the 12th day or before, we try to do a home visit. We work very closely with the school districts, but of course there's more that we can do as well as the school district. So we're trying to partner with them where we can figure out what we need to do. It is not a one-size-fits-all. How can we engage our students who want to come to school? How can we make learning fun, but still important enough to get the coursework and make sure it's rigorous enough that they will receive it? But we have to meet them where they are. As we know, all of our students not where we want them to be. So how do we engage them to come to school? How are we going to make this instruction where they will feel comfortable, where they will want to come to school? How do we address bullying? Bullying is an issue. It's real. So how do we address bullying that will allow students to come to school? And there's a district where crime is a factor, that parents is afraid to send their children to school. Things happen over the weekend in the community, and it comes over into the school. So when you're trying to deal with keep my child safe, or should I send my child to school, that is a struggle. We know they need to be in school. And so those are kinds of things that we hear all of the time. Transportation is an issue. Sometimes the bus might be late, or sometimes it's not enough bus drivers. So it's a lot of variables, of factors that is causing chronic absenteeism. So we have to see, can we come up with a plan to work towards decreasing this and engaging students? We have to look at, sometimes it's health issues. Health factor is a factor. Some kids are, have underlying conditions, and parents don't feel comfortable in sending them to school. COVID is still around. This is a season where asthma is up. So kids are missing school for different reasons. And so we have to look at the school climate, the culture of the school. Are they involved in activities? Sometimes if they are involved in, say, sports, they might want to come to school during the football season, basketball season, tennis. However we need to get them engaged, we need to figure out how we can do that. So as I stated earlier, it is not a one factor that we need to deal with. It's a multitude of things that we need to deal with. Of course, we need parental involvement, but sometimes we almost understand that some of our parents don't understand the importance of, from our perspective. They might care about their child, but it might not be what I think they should be doing at this time. Nevertheless, we need to meet them where they are and try to support them in order to encourage their students to school. For instance, a parent leaving for work at 5 o'clock in the morning and leaving a sibling there to say, get your younger siblings ready for school, that's a factor. That's an issue that we're dealing with. Parents think that a child is in school. Sometimes they take them and they go straight out the back door. So it's a lot of things that occur that is causing chronic absenteeism. So what can we do? We can work together, and that's what we're planning to do, is work with school districts. How can, as a body, how can we come together to address these issues and see, can we at least have a working document that can give superintendents and principals and all staff something to go by, and we're here to do that. The Department of Education is committed. We're committed to finding resources to help them. We have a place, an organization, Attenders Work, and it has a lot of good information on there. Last week I had the SAO officers to attend a webinar that was presented, and it gave us a lot of good ideas. So, and hopefully we can continue to provide resources to our school attendance officers so we can equip them so they'll be able to help the school districts as well. So I know I said a lot of things real fast, but we are working, we are committed, and we welcome any suggestions that you all may have that we can help move this needle forward in the right direction, because we know that chronic absenteeism affects dropout rates. Everything that we do we want students in school. It affects crime. If children are in school, they have idle time out there to do things that they probably shouldn't be doing, and then it's going to affect our graduation rate. So whatever we can do, we are trying to figure out how to do that. And it's a work in progress. We might need to take baby steps, but we're going to be working very diligently to see how we can work together to move it in the right direction. So with that being said, I'll entertain any questions that you may have. Ms. Rochelle, you have anything to add?
Well, I will, this is, obviously we know this is the problem across the state. And I guess you could say this is a plug, but not a plug for this. The Oxford School District and the University of Mississippi School of Ed, we're starting a national center in July of this coming year. And our breakthrough initiative, we want it to be chronic absenteeism. Y'all have heard me talk about improvement versus accountability and understanding the improvement science methodology of how to improve, right? which is the work from the Carnegie Foundation. And we're starting this national center. We want chronic absenteeism to be our breakthrough initiative in saying, not just districts, this is districts across the state of Mississippi. Let's establish some network improvement communities together and try some different change ideas in districts across our state working collectively by drilling down to some literal root causes instead of looking at this big umbrella of chronic absenteeism. And let's test 5, 6, 10, however many change ideas that we can drill down to, and let's test them, and then let's scale across the state the things that work, right? So this is work that we're passionate about too. We want to be a part of however we can assist. I was in Fairfax, Virginia 2 weeks ago at a network improvement community meeting. It was about 180 teachers in the room. The problems of practice that the majority of those schools are working on was chronic absenteeism.
Yes.
So this is not just Mississippi. So we can even leverage some other, states and communities that are working on this problem as well. So however we can assist as a national center in doing that, we want to do.
Well, we definitely will be contacting you. And so one of the things that, and I have not talked to Dr. Boone about this, what I would like to do is to come together with some districts that have high chronic absenteeism, as well as the district with the lowest chronic absenteeism, and how we can come together and come up with a plan, use the good practice that they're doing for their numbers, and just have a diverse panel that we just have a discussion like you are having today. How can we address that and put together a resource, or then add more superintendents and schools as we go, but start with those high performing district with the lowest rate as well as the highest rate, and see can we glean something from those school districts that are making it work. And we know the variables are different. We know every situation is different, whether it's resources are different for different school districts, but we can at least look at some comparison to see how we can move forward to start the conversation and to do what you just said, sir, to see can we start smart to make some things happen.
I'd like to speak, and I know I speak for my district only, Lamar County. We've got 10,400 students. Our biggest problem is we're allotted 2 SAOs, and I've got one that stays. I don't know why she stays. She don't make any money. I've had the second spot come in, and I've had 2 quit within the first week, and 1 not even show up when they've been hired. Not even show up for the job. They don't even, we call and say, where are you, And so I think, and in my opinion, from what I see, is that the pay for the SAO, I'm almost to the point where I'll supplement somehow district funds to help pay, because they're the backbone of that whole truancy issue. We have problems, and I have a very supportive, educational, supportive community. But I've got a youth court judge that gives parents time, or will not hold parents responsible for their children being in school. Will not. And then I do think, as you said, the age requirement, what is it,
5. If you have a kindergarten program, it's 5, and then it's 6 to 17.
Anyway, but when a kid turns 17 and they can walk out the door, and the SAO says, I can't touch them. They're right there ready to graduate, and they miss 40, 50 days of schools because they want to get a job. But the age requirement for, at some point we're going to have to include kindergarten and make it mandatory and make sure it's 18 or graduation, one or the other.
Well, sir, we are aware of the pay for SAO officers, and the department is committed to making sure that people are supported and given what they're supposed to.
I've had one of my SAOs, the one I can keep, just to keep her, I've paid for postage for letters being sent out, and I have given her keys to a district car so that she can go make home visits, because she's telling me, now this is what she tells me, and I'm about removing excuses, is that you will not get reimbursed for mileage and only has so much money for postage.
Well, sir, I would tell you that is not correct.
Okay, I'm just.
But, you know,
I'm
I would
removing
tell you that, but we have addressed all of those, we heard those same issues, and I would tell you, we have addressed those issues. We had a meeting this morning again with the supervisors, and one of the things I shared with them to make sure when they start to school, from start to end, that they have the supplies that's needed. We ordered supplies. We spent over $100,000 on stamps alone. We'll put other measures in place where if the mail are being returned, that we utilize the email system because most parents have email. Right. So the first thing, you'll use your email to try to reach parents.
That was my question to her, was like, why can't we just email it and do a read receipt? She said, no, but by the statute, it says you have to.
The statute, and I know I know that was shared with you, sir, because that was shared with me as well. And I got our attorney opinion. It says that they must be provided correspondence. It did not say how the correspondence should reach them. And so in our procedure document that all SAOs have, that the first thing they do is utilize the email system. If there's an email there, if not, then you would send a letter, and that will come back some of the mail being returned, because we get over half of the letters returned because parents move. So we're not reaching them because the mail does not reach to them, but then we're using our dollars because of mail that's being returned to us. So we'll try to put some things in place that will address that, utilizing the email system, because one thing that the pandemic taught us how to pivot, that we can do things differently to try to reach the audience that we need to reach. So I would tell you that we continue to try to improve and to make sure to address all of those issues or concerns that is brought before us, to make sure that the staff, including all of us here, are being responsive and making sure that we do what we're supposed to do in terms of that. So yes, the salary, we have a hard time, as you just stated, because the salary is low. However, when you factor in that they get 11 weeks out, pretty much a year, that's an incentive, and we try to share that with them, that out of 52 weeks out of the year, 11 of those that you are, because you're in the school setting, when the school is out, whether it's spring break, fall break, they get all those days out. Also, they receive, where I get leave time, accrued leave time, they receive that. So there are some other incentives. But with that being said, we understand that the pay is low. We are concerned about that, and that's one of the things that the department is committed to, addressing the pay issue for SAOs.
I think I remember saying this before. When I was coming up through school, 3 tardies was an absence. At 12, I don't care how good your grades were, you were on track to not pass. And that we may not can do that now, but there needs to be some type of, parents need to be held more accountable. Because especially, I'm on the elementary level. I have kids every day arrive at 10 o'clock and they live around the corner. Because they're too close to where a bus will go by and get them. So we're banking on the parent every day. And I'm just that principal. We tired of hearing excuses, Miss Armitra. Please just get the children here. We just need them here. Then when they come in at 10, they haven't been fed. So now we got to make sure the cafeteria is still open so they can eat. Or that parent will turn us in not feeding the children, but you can't get them here. So I think we need to go back to defining a way or figuring out a way to where parents are held accountable to help with that. Because as long as we're going to allow them to do it, they're going to do it.
See, we send buses. If you live next door to the school, we'll put a bus right in your house to pick them up. Just we again remove excuses.
Yeah.
1 mile road.
So
Yes.
when they bring them to school, it's done.
And I can't see, Mr. Hampton?
Yes, I'm sorry.
In terms of the court, we do forward the information to the court. Of course, we have no authority over the judges. And so.
Yeah, I know that.
And I know. And so we.
Luckily, my youth court judge, the governor promoted him to another higher court, so he's gone. I got another one, so how you doing? He was horrible at his job as youth court judge, and so the governor promoted him to a higher court.
So I have addressed that, because the FAOs have shared that we're sending, the information in, but the courts are not doing what they're supposed to do. So I recognize that, sir, but in terms of what I can do, what FAOs can do, and that's the unfortunate part about it. Yep. We can follow our rules and regulations, but if it's not adhered at another level that we don't have the control over, then we're back where we started. So I started off saying that we're all in this together, so we need to get everybody at the table and see how we can find a workable solution to address these issues. Yes, ma'am.
And I've actually, with my SAO, started recommending that she take these cases to justice or chancery. We're going to take it to justice court to keep it out of youth court because he won't do anything about it anyway. So let's take him to another court, And she didn't like doing that. She liked to do it sparingly, but I just told her, I said, some point when the kids miss 40 days, we've got to do something, And it's not because I'm telling you, teachers are calling off the hook because I got documentation. I got principals going to the house, beating on doors. You talking about doing something, we are doing everything. And so
we're trying, because some school districts, when the student meets 20 days, and as we share with staff, that we should catch the student before they miss 20 days and see can we get those students in court. So 12 days does not have to be consecutive. So if there's a pattern, we should be catching those. But as you stated, we don't have enough FAO officers. It's hard when we put out the advertisement before we can fill the position. They have turned down the position, the position as you stated. So there's a lot of things that we have to deal with. So I want you all to know we're not trying not to do and then get all the people there, but we're having issues as well where people are not accepting the job, or they come and get some training and then someone else will hire them within the 6 months or 12 months before that. So we have a lot of, this morning we've signed at least 5 FAO officers and waiting on them to come back to say that they accept the offer. And so we might get 2 out of the 5 and say that we will accept. So there are some challenges, but we're working through those challenges. Yes, ma'am.
I think my situation is the opposite of what Mr. Hampton has. And it was, we sat with the youth court judge to find out what's going on, how can we support as a community piece. And I didn't know that it could be either sent to the youth court or chancery court. According to the judge, this is just information we received for our area. She has not received none for the year of 22-23. She stated that according to her records, the 21-22 school year, she had received 300. As of the time we had our meeting, I want to say it was maybe February of this year, she received 1.
Well, when you was here the last time, I heard you.
Okay, that's what I
wanted. And so I checked into that, and one of the FAO officers there is Mr. Emerson, and his supervisor is Ms. Crane, and so they've sent me some information. So I want you to know, Ms. Jones, that I heard you, and that I'm making sure that we have our documentation to say that what we've done. So thank you.
A little interested in policy around attendance things. You mentioned, I remember back in the day, 3 tardies, absent, right? As far as other districts, as far as parental notes and things like that. So what is the limit that we can push policy-wise legally, right, to restrict?
Now, according to the compulsory law, as Mr. Hampton stated, if there's a prescribed kindergarten, it starts at age 5. If not, it's 6. And the elementary level numbers are higher than normal because based on what Ms. Connery just said, parents are not bringing the younger students to school. So in terms of what we do, we have to 5 days. If the school district sends us referrals saying that Amarita has missed 5 days, at that time, that triggers the FAO officer to send a letter, make phone calls to try to reach the parents at that time to say, why Amarita is not coming to school. And if they continue to miss school after that 5 days, after we've sent a letter to them, letting them know that you're on our radar and this kid must be back in school. Most time they bring them back to school within that timeline. But it becomes a revolving door. So we constantly sending letters, we constantly doing home visits and sending to the court. And I've heard from the FAO officer that the judge said, well, you just brought Amarita this month, so why are you bringing her back? Because as you stated, nothing is being done. The parents are not being held accountable. And that takes on another issue. However, local school districts have their own policy about absenteeism and all of that. But 20 days, I'm told that some school district or most school district, when they reach 20 days, they unenroll the student. So we don't want that to happen. So what we're trying to do is catch those students before that 20 day and get them back in school and make sure the courts are working with those parents. And if you continue to keep your child out of school, here's the consequences. So I don't know what type of consequences that the judge put forth for parents, but there should be some.
I'm just thinking it's like, anybody limit the number of parent notes? I know there's districts that say,
We only allow 6 parent notes per semester.
and then it's medical after that or unexcused. And then I know some districts say, senior that misses more than 10 days, you can graduate, but you're not walking, right? I mean, there's districts in I'm trying to think of ways to hold people more accountable, but obviously stay within the law. So is there anybody else that does anything that's maybe out there other than limiting parent notes in that, what I just said about?
We did the seniors walking graduation in so many days.
But as I stated earlier, I recognize that it's a partnership deal. So we will be willing to come into your school district when you have your parent meeting, PTA meetings, and see whenever it's time to, you have parents there. Maybe we might not get the parents that need to be there, but if we can start working with the community and see, can we start engaging parents and talk about the importance. And I know school districts are doing that. Most school districts have parent centers. And so we could work with the parent centers and see how we can get parents involved. I think that's a key that we need to impress on and make sure that parents understand the ramification that when their child is not in school, the quality of life or the lack of quality they will have as adults if they're not in school to receive the instruction in order to graduate. Because if you're missing 25 days of instruction, then that's a lot. Where are you? That's why we have overage students, and that's where the bullying come in. That's where all the other factors start happening because they're being retained. And then also we need to look at why we're suspending students. We need to look at what are some of the things why we're suspending students. Are we suspending students because they don't have a belt on? So we have to figure out how they want to be outside the classroom. How can we help keep them in there? Not the students that are causing issues from a safety perspective, but those non-issues that whether I have my pants, my shirt in my pants, or I don't have a belt today. Instead of sending me home, perhaps we can get some belts in the school and say, you're going to put this belt on for this day or whatever. So we need to look at how we're suspending students because we're helping them stay outside the school, you know. And educators have an awesome task that we do the best we can with what we have. But we need to look at some other ways instead of just keeping students outside the school, because that's where they want to be. We give them a free day, 3 days, then they don't come back the next 3 days because they've gotten accustomed to being at home. So some things that those are kind of things that I would like for us to have conversation around and see how we can address those to make sure we come up with a workable plan for the district as well, for the students and the parents. If there's no other question for me, thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with each of you to see how we can continue to address this issue. Give me a call, email me if you have any ideas, because we are really looking for ideas and try to work with school districts to see how we can address these issues.
Well, Dr. Tell, thank you. Appreciate you being here. And as you are aware of additional resources, ideas, or developments, do let us know. And I think we've got a group that's eager to do everything possible to try to support student attendance. And we appreciate your advice today, and hope we can stay connected.
And thank you all for supporting us, and I look forward to continuing to work with each of you. Thank you.
All right, well, colleagues, if there are no other items, we were able to finish up our other topic early, so we can stand adjourned if there's nothing else. I wish everybody safe travel.